supporting him. All his friends are on a different plane, and he must have been hurting. He's hurting emotionally, but more so he's hurting physically because he's sort of all over his body. He's scraping his body with a piece of rock, stone, or something, and he's really in a bad state. And nobody appears to be on his side, but he is able to see through the gloom, and he says, "I know in whom I believe." And he was certain that he could follow down that path. Yes.
Even though I like your argument, they were Leviticus. The simple reason, these were temptations that came to Job, and they came quick and fast to break him. And he refused to be broken. He chose not to be broken. Every one of us will experience temptations that will break our faith if we decide to let them break it. God says, "Be with me, I am with you." And he demonstrated in Jesus, who refused to be broken, and who tell us all his example. So if we're going to look at it the way you explained, then Job was not tempted.
He was not tempted? No. I was looking at something. You said that Job was not tempted, or you said he was tempted?
I say if we agree with you, he will not have been tempted. But these were temptations, and they came thick and fast.
But Job had no choice.
He had a choice, but he would not follow.
But that would make you do that first. But he didn't have a choice as to whether he lose his children or he will lose his property.
The temptation must come. And God allows the devil to tempt us more and more severely each time.
Right.
So if you then go on, you bring a hotter one in an effort to break you.
Okay. So we're on the same wavelength. Right. So, yeah. So the point here I'm making though is that in our lives, we ourselves are going to be faced with these challenges in life, and we're not to reach the point where we're going to curse God because where's our faith? And none of us will ever be, in my view, will have to suffer the Job. We will suffer. I believe that young children in school doing exams and so on. The worst thing sometimes that can happen to a child is to fail an examination, especially when a child is on a trajectory going upwards, and then the child fails and feels broken-hearted and devastated and want to stop going to school and so on. And so parents have gotten out to be around the child and just encourage the child and so on. As adults, sometimes we also face situations with adults. And that's why this week, as I said, we're talking relationships and so on this morning. And when it happens to us, I believe that the reason for our family and the reason for the church family is to assist us along the way. Now, when we look at the church family today, and we look at Job's friends, is there a comparison?
For the simple reason, if you were going to give every born solid person that comes in church, 19 different come in, not one is ready. So to get one good one, about 19 bad ones. So tell me, wow. If that's happening in church, what will happen?
Okay. So you say that we don't have, there's not much to depend upon in the church if they are struggling. Let's think about it. If you are struggling in the church, should you not be able to go out with your brothers and sisters? Yeah, you seem to have a negative view of the church.
No. We have a real view of the church. God will not send you to everybody in church.
Okay. Yes, awesome.
I like the point the brother made about one good and all the rest bad. But the Bible also says, if you see a brother who has fallen, you who is spiritual, should go and have the brother. So that good one should realize that it's his responsibility not to push away the 19, but see how we can help those 19. That's why God has brought us together as a church. If he didn't want us to operate that way, he would have saved us by ourselves and put us in a cave in Cave Hill. we have a service, but he has brought us together so that we can encourage each other. So if we are good, or if we deem ourselves as good, then our responsibility is to help those who are weak.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think that I'm not bad as people seem to be in the church. They consider the fact that the people came together in an effort to come. Probably go for finding or they have this conception or anything. But in her, they came out of seem to come out of sense of loyalty and love and in the church you will have persons, something that person that worship with God. It's just that sometimes they want to get whatever.
Let's pick this away.
Okay. But yes,
how about the situation with Joseph and his brethren?
I know this is
and here it is that we see, although that Joseph's brother meant it for evil, Joseph still had a mind, a relationship still grounded in Christ. Look within the church and see if you don't see the same comparison.
But no, yes,
Sometimes you have a short winter, not much snow, so you have a long winter drawn out, and people are weary and tired of it. The question is, who's with you when it matters most? And if you look at Job, who's with Job when it matters most? God.
Later on before we will come to a lesson called being alone. And I did that one is going to answer a lot of questions I asked you today. Can you be alone in the church? Can you be alone in the church family? Can you be alone in your own family? You know, because how you answer no. I believe when we study that chapter, when we get there, we will be able to answer a lot of questions that seem to be giving us problems now. So what it really is the business of the church, or the business in relation to its members. Should we have members in the church who are alone? I'm not talking walking alone. I'm talking about being alone because there's no one else that they can relate to. Or some person in a family who has a mother and a father and brothers and sisters but is alone. And I remember there's a book somebody wrote called Alone in a Crowd. It means that you could be alone, and although you're surrounded with thousands of people. It also means they believe that you can be alone, although you have all of the other family members around. And it also means that you can be alone in the church, although the church is really a brotherhood, as it were. So I think my 15 minutes may have run away now. And I thank you very much, but I believe that I give you something to think about for the day. Next one.
And thank others for his presentation. That's what we do this morning. I just tell you who swept along in the corner of a pastor, and he will speak for a few minutes, and then he will introduce pastors.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Sabbath. Good to see you here this morning. Early o'clock, yes, Sister Rob. You had a late night last night? Late? Oh, that's relative. That's relative. But we're here this morning, and we're here once again to be at the feet of Jesus. See the hands of those who enjoyed the week thus far. Yes? The week has been a tremendous blessing. I have to say that myself. If you don't say it, I'll say it. Very impressive. Because you know sometimes he would ask for a response. If you didn't respond, he would sit and he would respond and say amen for himself. He enjoyed all by himself. And he is testifying to the fact that he has had a blessing, a tremendous blessing as well, being here all the way down in St. Lucie. We still battling this up and down here. But he is St. Lucy. Whether you call it up, whether you call it down, he's hearing us. Yes? And it has been a blessing. We have said that already. We want to continue the trend that we have started at the beginning of the week. Something you don't know about Pastor Haynes. What have you learned so far? Used to be. I guess hear that. Say he used to be a football. He used to be, you hear that? He said you all right? No, good. Anything else? He said you know. 12 years in ministry. 23 years in marriage. Anything else? Yes, son hearing. That's one wife. Yeah, let me handle that with one wife first. That's one wife. One wife. She's here with us today. Karen Haynes. I don't think everybody may know you stand so that they can see who Pastor Haynes' wife is. Yes, please, for the visitors who are here, thank you so much for being here and lending him to us for the week. She lend you, you know? Good. Somebody said? Yes. He loves to, one of the things, whatever God has given to him, he wants to share with others. He loves to, I didn't tell you that. That's his ability. And God uses a giftedness, yes? All right, this morning, can anybody tell me what Pastor Haynes' favorite color is? I don't want you guessing. I don't want you to guess. You don't worry about that. You don't worry about how I know. Huh? Anybody? I heard somebody. Somebody down here, somebody said black, but somebody down here said blue. Turquoise, somebody said. What secondary school you went to? That's the first time I ever hear it said the Commonwealth School. Somebody said blue or yellow. You want me to tell them or you want to tell them? He want to know what he gonna say, yes? Well, I found out, let me put it that way, that his favorite color is blue. Yes? He's a, that's why? It was blue before you had to come here. All right. But certainly, you know, it's good to know a little bit about your pastors, yes? So that when you see them, it's not only just Pastor Haynes or Pastor so-and-so. It's Pastor Haynes who is an accountant who loves to play football. He's a better footballer now. He's also 12 years in ministry, and he's married for 23 years. And, you know, it's good to know some things about the pastor. So that when you meet him, you ask him how the football going. He may just tell you, well, I'm just watching for now. Go. He saw he on you can't say. You're going to show he a thing or two. But we're glad to have Pastor Haynes with us. So, Pastor, without further ado, we welcome you to the podium as you share this morning's, the first presentation for this morning with us. And I ask you please to give him your undivided attention as you moving this back? As you bless us once again this morning. Good morning, everybody. Ooh. Let's see if we can warm that up a little bit. Good morning, everybody. Happy Sabbath to you. Did you have a good week? Yeah, it was a good week. It was a good week. One thing we realized this week, you remember last week I told you, last Sabbath I told you about 10% of the church supports the church activities.
You remember I told you that? Yeah, you remember I told you that? We proved it this week. Yeah, we proved it this week. On average, we had between 40 to 50 persons. And the total membership of this district on the books is about 500. So we proved it this week. Yeah? So it helps us to understand that we know where we are. Hello? Come on now. Once you see, the whole thing about change is understanding where you are and knowing where you need to be. Right? That's the whole thing about change. So don't look at it as a negative. Look at it as that at least you know where you are. And once you know where you are, you know what you need to do in order to do what? In order to improve. Because church is about growth. Church is about what? Oh, y'all you don't feel like talking to me this morning. Y'all don't want to talk to me. I didn't get that. You been asleep late? I sent you home in time. You should at least got at least 8 hours sleep. If I send you home at 9:30, shouldn't you get home by 10 o'clock and go straight in your bed? Oh, when nobody didn't tell y'all don't go home at 9:30. anyhow, we had a good time. We had a good time. Did you have a good time? The beauty about it is that when you have a good time, it doesn't matter, you know. Yeah, because sometimes we have socials from 7 o'clock and we finish at after 12 because we're having a what? A good time. So as long as you're learning and you're having a good time, you don't worry about the time. And when it comes to the work of God, we should always be willing to sacrifice time to learn how to do God's work better. You don't got to say amen for that, but it is true. Whether you agree with it or not, it is true. We must be willing to sacrifice time in order to do God's work better. Now, I live the furthest away. Yeah, I live the furthest away. When you're home, sitting down, probably getting something to drink, I'm still on the road. Yeah? But I enjoy coming every night so that I can present and I can share what God has laid on my heart to share with you. Yeah? And I will do it again next week if you want me to. Nobody didn't say amen to that one at all, but they didn't say amen to that one at all. They say give it in small doses, Pastor, in small doses. Small doses. Somehow I'm not hearing this. Can you give me a little bit more? 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2. All right. This morning our topic, I'm going to do 3 presentations and I'm going to attempt to do them by 1 o'clock. That's what I'm going to attempt to do. I'm going to try to be successful at it. But if I don't finish at 1 and I finish after 1, when I go home I will review and try to figure out why I finish after 1. Is that reasonable to everybody? Yeah, because it's all about feedback, reflection. It's all about feedback and reflection. So I will go home and I will sit and I say, but why did I finish after 1? So if I go after 1, that's all right. I will think about it and see. And I will make sure that next time I do a presentation like this, I will make sure that I'm able to finish for 1. The purpose for blessings. The purpose of blessings. Bow your heads with me as we pray. Father, this is your moment now. Speak through me. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. All right, I'm not having control. Why does God bless us? Because he loves us. Amen. Who agree with that? Who agree that God blesses you because he loves you? Yeah. He blesses us because he loves us. He's a loving God. That's why he blesses us. Anybody else? He blesses. Why does he bless us? He blesses us. He blesses us so that we can bless others. Amen. Do we do that? This is how the answer started. Yes. Not all the time. Sometimes. I ain't too sure. Yes, sir. When you're obedient, he blesses you. Okay. Interesting. When we're obedient, he blesses us. Obedience brings blessings. Okay. All right. Well, he gives them life so that they can tap into the other blessings that he has.
Obedience brings continued blessings. I want us to understand that. We don't obey to be blessed. We obey because we're blessed. Just like we don't obey to be saved. We obey because we're saved. Right? So we come to church on Sabbath not because we want to have a little mark against our name that we came to church on Sabbath so that it can be counted as good. We come to church on Sabbath because that's what saved people do. You said amen there just now? Let's say amen again.
Amen.
Because the rest of you don't understand that one. It's probably because they're so close to you that you get it. But purpose of blessings. Why does God trust us with blessings? Does God trust us with blessings? I think the reason that's why he gives us. He gives us blessings because he trusts us with blessings. All right, he trusts us with blessings. So just for a couple of minutes, just identify some of the blessings God gives to us. Don't talk about life. Don't talk about family. Don't talk about friends. Don't talk about a good job. Don't talk about food to eat. Yeah, you get that one before you can say it, you know. He blesses us with what else? He keeps us in our right minds and our right memories. Amen. Y'all should say amen loud to that. Or not some of y'all will be down in Black Rock. It's down, right? It's down in Black Rock, right? Yeah. Down in Black Rock. Just in your mind, just identify some of the blessings that. I just want you to reflect. This is reflection time now. Reflect on what God has blessed you with. Don't tell me. I want you to reflect between you and God. Yeah. 30 seconds. Just reflect on what God has blessed you with. Amen. For people that reflect on our blessings, then face real setup. Why y'all look so sad? Y'all reflecting on our blessings and y'all face straight so. Huh? Maybe you're reflecting on our blessings and God smile on your face. You focus. You're just reflecting. Reflecting means that you're just enjoying the moment. You got God smile on your face. Y'all reflecting on our blessings, your face so. Well, that had me a little worried just now. Let's turn in our Bibles to Exodus. Exodus chapter 3, the purpose of blessings. Why does God bless us? Why does God bless us? Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3, verse 15 to 22. Can you read for me, please? All right, just a minute. Everybody's going to read. We want everybody reading. Let's read together at the count of 3. 2, 3. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Go on. Mm-hmm. 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 Amen. Go on. And I? No, not by a mighty hand. Stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do. Go on. Go on. Yes. Verse 22. Oh, praise the word of the Lord. So there's a question there. What's the question asked? What was God's promise to Moses? He will bring the people out of, he will bring them out of Egypt. What else did he promise? He will bring them to a land full of milk and honey. So they'll have a lot of cows and a lot of bees. Yeah, that's cow. But no, sorry. Cow milk not good. They will have a lot of almonds and they will have a lot of bees. What does he promise? He says they will not go out empty-handed. Hallelujah. But watch it. What? Ooh, what's happening there? Watch it now. He says to the children of Israel, I am going to allow you to find favor in the sight of the Egyptians. I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to make a statement now. Blessings come because God allows us to find favor. Oh. All the blessings that we receive is because God allows us to find favor. So when you get a job, it is not because you're intelligent. It's because God has allowed you to find favor in the eyes of the employer. So the money that you get when the month comes because God has allowed you to find favor. But I expect that. Well, I expect that. Too many Adventists are coming to church late. And that's a big problem too. That's a big problem too. But I don't want us to miss the point. The point is, we only receive blessings because God has allowed us to find favor. I want us to remember that. I want us to put it in the front of our minds, because there are people who believe that they receive blessings because of their own merit. And so therefore they can do with the blessings whatever they feel like doing with it. So God says, when you're about to leave, I don't like how that's sounding. When you're about to leave, understand that I will allow you to find favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. I'm just going to shorten this up. I'm just going to shorten this up right now. Exodus chapter 1, 11, 1 to 3. God now is about to place the last plague upon the Egyptians. He's about to place the last plague upon the Egyptians. And he calls Moses. He says to Moses, Moses, listen up, Moses. I'm going to drop the last plague on Egypt right now. Go tell the children of Israel. Go and get your blessing. Sometimes we miss out on a blessing that God has in store for us because we don't act in the time that God wants us to act in. Sometimes we miss out on the blessing that God has in store for us because we don't attend the activities that God expects us to attend. Am I making sense to somebody? And God says to Moses, tell the children, go now. Go when? Go now. He says, go and ask of your neighbor. Go now. Because I'm going to drop the plague on Egypt. And when I drop that plague on Egypt, they're going to tell you, get out of town. And true to the word, God dropped the last plague. Every firstborn dead. You see, we thought that we only made firstborn children, but it was firstborn cattle. Are you with me? Firstborn animals. I'm saying if you had a cat and you had a kitten, that dead. If you had a goldfish and they had a little baby goldfish, firstborn, dead. So the whole of Egypt was filled with mourning, and Pharaoh calls Moses and says to Moses, he wake up Moses in the middle of the night. You imagine in the middle of the night you wake up Moses? Tell him I'm going to call Moses. In the middle of the night. Moses comes, he says, listen, he says, get you and your people out of Egypt. Go to your God and take your cattle and your sheep and whatever you need and go and worship him and listen to what he says and pray for me. I just love how God works out stuff. God says, Pharaoh says to Moses, when you go and pray to your God, pray for me. And so the children of Israel, in obedience to God, they went and they borrowed. No. I want us to understand receiving favor. The children of Israel were not employees. You with me? The children of Israel owned nothing. The children of Israel are basically slaves. And here are the slaves going to the master and saying to the master, I want some gold. And I want some silver. And I want some. And the master says, just give me a minute. Oh, my church, man, you won't get that one. The master says, just give me a minute. And he goes inside and he brings out all the gold that he has. He says, I'm coming back. And he goes back inside and he brings out all the clothes that he has. And give the slaves. When God allows you to find favor in the eyes of people, it doesn't matter how hard the heart of the person is, they will give you what God has for you. So you may have a relative overseas, and all of a sudden you see a $500 come through Western Union. Huh? Don't rejoice and say, well, I got $500 to spend and going down. Understand, it's because God has allowed you to find favor. If you want a story, how long this story going to be? Mm-hmm. And so he paid you more? Oh, hallelujah. Favor. So when you get something, it's not because you're a good person, it's because God has allowed you to find favor. Because sometimes you don't even deserve it. Am I talking true? Sometimes you don't even deserve it. But God allows you to find favor in the eyes of... I'm making this point over and over all the time because we need to understand that the blessings we receive comes from God. The blessings comes from God. The blessings comes from God. I got to make that point again. I'm going quickly. All right. Exodus 20. Exodus 20. Somebody say something? I hear in a voice, but I'm not saying. Pharaoh believed they would be last. I don't think Pharaoh was waiting around to see if they're there anymore. I think after leaving his firstborn son, he said, well, I'm not risking this anymore. But let me just say this to you. If he had remained stubborn, he would get another one. He would have gotten another one. But when you have lost all of the firstborn in your house and all of the firstborn in your barn, we're talking about servants in the house losing their firstborn. It was not just only in the palace, no. We're talking about throughout Egypt, all those Egyptians losing their firstborn. You think that if only Pharaoh's firstborn had died, that the Egyptians would have given people? No, the Egyptians would say, well, you could get another one. But every Egyptian household suffered loss. And that is why Pharaoh acted with such haste, because he understood that it was not only his household that was affected, but he could hear the mourns and the cries throughout the whole land. And it was his fault. Yes, ma'am. Which one? Mm-hmm. Why people just make these hard statements when they're trying to do a little presentation? Why does do that to me, no? Huh? Why does do that to me? Huh? I left school 12 years ago. Let me say before that Pastor Blackman is, he left school after me. What God does not hinder, he allows. Yeah, and the Bible writer understood that, especially in the Old Testament. The biblical writer understood that. But you also understood that God already said when he was talking to Moses, he says to Moses, let me tell you, when you're going to ask Pharaoh, he will not let the people go, not even with a mighty hand. Yeah, but when I drop my wonders on him, even then, he was stubborn until he lost his ear. Yeah, so what God does not hinder, he allows. And the biblical writer understood that. And the biblical writer never sought to give any praise for anything to the enemy. He wanted us to understand that God is in control of every situation. Yeah, and I like to use this analogy. You know, when you have your little baby and you're feeding them from the bottle, when you want to give them something to drink from the bottle, what's the first thing you do? You don't put the bottle in their mouth. You test it on your hand. And that's what God does. Because when we talked about Job this morning, God knew that Job had the strength to hold on. And that's why he said, have you considered my servant Job? Because God was boasting. God said, God, man down there named Job. Have you considered him? Yeah? So yes, the devil did what he did, but he only did what he did because God allowed him. All right, where are we? Exodus chapter 20? Yeah, 22 to 26. I'm watching the time because I want to finish this one here quickly. Exodus 22 to 26. Here's God now talking to Moses. He had spoken to the children of Israel before. And when he started to talk to the children of Israel, the mountain started to shake. And black clouds started to form and thunder started to roll. And the children of Israel said, wait. Moses, you go up and talk to God by yourself and come back and tell us what he said to you. Because we really can't deal with this. We really can't handle this, God. And so Moses goes up to the mount with Joshua. He goes up in the mountain. God is sharing with Moses. God is sharing with Moses his vision for his people. Read it for me, please. God says, this is my vision. I see a people who will worship me with their burnt offerings. I see a people who will not worship gods of silver and gods of gold. That's what God is saying. That's what God is saying to Moses. He's saying this to Moses. He's saying this to Moses. That was God's intention for the use of the blessings. Let's look at Exodus 25. Exodus 25. Exodus 25. I'm going to read. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel that they bring me an offering of every man that giveth it willingly with his heart, ye shall take my offering. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them. Watch it now. Gold, silver, brass, and blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine linen, and goat's hair, and ram skin dyed red, and badger skin, and shittim wood, oil for the light, spices for anointing oil, and for sweet incenses, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Oh, y'all read that, right? You saw the amount of things that they got from the Egyptians. the Israelites didn't have shit in wood, but listen, all of the things that are listed from verse 3 right down to verse 7 were all of the things that they got straight out of the homes of the Egyptians. Oh man, church, man. And then he says, when they bring me an offering, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. The purpose that God blessed the children of Israel was because he wanted them to make him a sanctuary. Yes, sir. No hard questions or no? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, willingly is expected to be there. You must give willingly. If you give grudgingly, you have not yet given. God says, watch this now, church. Watch this and understand this. The people received the blessings because God allowed them to find favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. The reason why God allowed the children of Israel to find favor in the eyes of the Egyptians is because he knew that when he brought them out of Egypt, that he would require a place for them to worship him, and therefore he was blessing them so that they can build him the sanctuary. Oh. God blessed the children of Israel to carry forward his work. The reason for the blessing was to carry forward God's work. He says, don't make any gods of gold or of silver. Make me a sanctuary. And in order to make the sanctuary, God did not do like Pharaoh and tell them find straw to make brick. God ensured that whatever they got from the Egyptians were all that was necessary to build the sanctuary. I mean, if I was the children of Israel and they say, "Ma, bring me purple cloth," I said, "Buddy, where are you going with cloth? I want gold." You understand? If I say, "Ma, bring me," what it is? Badger skin, dye red, and shittim wood, and blue. I would take the blue cloth. God, blue is my favorite color for sure. I would take the blue cloth. Church, you understand what I'm saying? Things that you would believe are not important, things that you believe that are not important, God needed to put in his sanctuary. Watch it now. And God says on its stones, he said where, and he says the stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. God had already knew what he wanted, and he gave to the children of Israel what he wanted so that his sanctuary. So blessings, the children's blessings, came because God wanted them to build his sanctuary and to carry forward his word. So let's see what the children of Israel did instead. Oh, grateful people. Watch this. Watch this now. The children of Israel, they're down at the foot of the mountain. They're at the foot of the mountain. You listening to me? Moses in the mountain for almost 14 days. And they go over to Aaron. Go over to Aaron. I could use you as Aaron. You don't mind being Aaron, right? You sure you don't mind being Aaron? They go over to Aaron and say, Aaron, listen. We don't know where that man Moses gone. He brought us out of Egypt. Wrong! You see, the first step to going against what God wants you to do is by not giving praise to God when it's supposed to be given. God is the one who brought them out of Egypt, but instead they said it was Moses who brought us out of Egypt. They did not recognize that their freedom was not due to any articulation of speech by Moses. It was only by the hand of God. No, I like God. God got sense of humor, no. God is in the mountain talking to Moses, and because God hears everything, God heard the children of Israel down there saying, and God says to Moses, Moses, your people. But God says to Moses, Moses, your people down there is giving problems. And Moses said, God, no, not my people, your people. Moses understood that it was not him that brought him out of Egypt, because he was a man that used to stutter. It wasn't him that brought the people out of Egypt. It was God. So even though God was putting a little something there, he said, God, don't get it wrong. Them is your people, not my people. But here they go to Aaron, and they say to Aaron, Aaron, we don't know where Moses gone to. Let us build something so we can worship. No, understand, these people were living in a pagan society for years. Over 400 and something years they were living in a pagan society. And so that is what they did. They worship other gods. And Aaron says, what Aaron said? Break out your earrings out of your ears. Bring all the bracelets around your children's hand and come and bring them. And they brought them, and the Bible says that they threw all the gold in the fire. And then from what came out, Aaron took a carving tool and carved out a calf. And he says to the people, go home, rest yourself, because tomorrow we're going to have a party. We're going to come and worship this calf. Yes, sir. Yeah, there were some Egyptians among me. No, the Israelites were also accustomed to doing it. Yeah, the Israelites were, because that's something that some of them had come up. Remember, 430 years in a society that you are being controlled by you will sooner or later assimilate yourself into the culture. And so Moses, God says, well, get down off the mountain and go and talk to my people. And Moses comes down the mountain, and as they're coming down the mountain, one man says, hey, I hear this song of music. Probably there's a party. Another man said, no, that sounds like the song of war. Moses said, this is not the song of party, this is the song of people disobeying God. And Moses is a serious man. Moses comes down off the mountain. And Moses runs, you know, with a jockey. Y'all know what a jockey? You mean tell me that y'all in Bible study don't know what a jockey? You know what a jockey? Nobody never jockey you? At the gram, you understand what's a jock kick, right? No, you know what's a jock kick? Yeah. At the gram, what pictures you used to watch when you were small, man? Moses runs. No. I like to, when I read the Bible, I like to imagine it. The Bible just says Moses kicked down the statue, right? I believe that they didn't build a small little statue. They built a little small statue like that. No, they built a big statue. So Moses had to run and launch himself through the air and hold up rocks and kick it down. He had to jump and kick it down. All right, something. What? 1, 2, 2. All right, don't worry about it. That's the enemy up there trying to do something. Not. Please take that within context. People just say that within context. All right. Let's come back. Let's come back. Where was I now? Moses kicks down the calf. He kicks down the calf. And then he crushes it. Moses got to be a real strong man. Because he's crushing molten gold. He crushes it in the water and he says to the people, drink that. That's a serious thing. And then Moses goes to one end of the camp. Sorry. Moses goes to one end of the camp. You with me? And he says, all those who are on God's side, follow me. And people start following Moses. When Moses got to the other end of the camp, Moses said to the Levites, take your swords and go back through the camp. All who in the camp, kill. That's a serious thing. And if you think that was it, it says that God then put a plague on the camp. Why? Why would God react that way? Because the children of Israel misappropriated the blessings of God. The blessings that God had intended to build him a sanctuary, to carry forward his work, they decided to do what they wanted with it. Yeah. Them is some wicked people now. Yeah? Well, brethren, are there wicked people or not? Huh? Huh? Are there wicked people or not? Boy, them is some wicked people. And all we wicked just like them. Because we are taking what God has blessed us with to do his work and to do our own thing. Let's look at some of the blessings. I think I got that one coming up next. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 You really thought Moses was a cool fella? This Moses gave a man, I kill him one time with one blow. Moses isn't a cool fella, though. No, I understand what you're saying. You understand what you're saying, or no? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Aaron would have been a dead man, even though Aaron treated people on the bus. Watch this, though. Watch this. Watch this. The people of God use the blessings of God to make a golden calf. Always understand where you receive a blessing. Are you listening to me? Always understand where you receive a blessing. When you receive a blessing from God, don't just take it for granted. Always ask God, God, what is it that you want me to do with this thing? You know, you may get a little 500. You know, no, not you. It wasn't you. Up and on. Yeah. The $500 that you get from your relative overseas that coming through Western Union, and you feel so happy with it that you go down to shopping and buy 3 pair of shoes. Money burn your hand. When God already had something already in store for that money. You know, sometimes as Christians, God blesses us, and we're so happy to see the money that we just go and spend it well. And then a few days later, our car goes bubble up, bub. And we say, boy, I wish I had that money. Am I talking truth? So what were the blessings that these people used? The first blessing that they used was, it's time. They had to take time to go and pull the earrings out of the children's ears. Now, you feel that they went and yank them out, they went and take them out carefully, unscrew the thing. You with me? You want to know how earrings is put in there? To take off the bracelets off their hand. It took time. It took time to bring them to Aaron and wait in line. They had to wait in line, you know. They had to wait in line because there was a lot of them, you know. They had to wait in line. It took time. It took time to stand up and watch Aaron throwing all of that gold into the fire and bringing it back out and carving. That took time. And here were the children of God. Here were the children of God, blessed with time. Blessed with time. And instead of using the time to worship God or to get a closer understanding of who God is, they've used the time to go after their own selfish desires. How many of us do that? If some of us are servants, well, you want me to say yes? When it comes time to worship God, where are we? I don't know if I said this here already, but I'm going to say it again just in case I didn't say it already. When the church makes a decision and they say we are having worship on Sunday evening and on Wednesday evening, and the church says, yes, we agree to that time, it is a covenant with God to meet with him at that time for worship. And to follow after your own selfish desire and not come to church, you are violating the covenantal relationship with God. Correct? When we as parents, we get the little ones, you know. You know, when we get the little ones, we say, well, they're too soft to come to church. You ever heard that one? Yeah, they're too soft. Yeah, and then you understand sometimes you need to, when your children, when you have newborns, you need to keep them away from church people. Because church people don't know how to play with baby toes. There's always one putting a hand in the baby face. He's so cute. And you don't know part of no bring the hand from. You understand me? So when a child is susceptible to viruses, it's best to keep your child until you know what people say, to the hard enough. Yeah, to the wean, to the harden a little bit. But then they say, well, I have to get up early so that I can get them to nursery on time, and so therefore I can't come to church on Wednesday night or Sunday night. You're listening to me? Then they're going to make sure I get them up early so that they can get to school, primary school on time. And they're going to have exams going out, so I got to make sure so they can't come to church on Sunday night and Wednesday night. And so you train your children to come to church only on Sabbath morning. And when they get 17 years old, and they're not going to school anymore, you then try to bring them to church. I usually try to tell them, you then try to tell them, you need to come to church on a Wednesday night. You're trained them for so long. You brought them up in the habit of not coming to worship. And then when they get 17 years old, you come and tell the pastor, I want you to pray for my son. I want you to pray for my daughter, pastor, because I can't get them to come to church. Well, obviously you can't get them to come to church. You train them that way. Time. Those children of Israel wasted the time that God had ordained to be used for his work. How many of us are wasting that time the same way? And when we get a request from the church to do corporate witnessing, we don't go nowhere. We stay home. Am I talking to somebody? We talking stewardship this morning. When I know that I have a neighbor or I have or there's somebody that I have been witnessing to, that I only wait until when the church calls corporate worship to go and witness to them. When I should really be taking some of my own, some of that time that I have during the week to give them a call. You understand? Sister White says, and the Bible says, we will all be held accountable for the time, and what we have done with the time that God has given us. What else did they use? Money. What did they use? Money. Goal that the Lord allowed them to get favor in the eyes of people that receive. How many of us don't return a faithful tithe? We don't even recognize that the blessing that we have received comes from God. That's what tithe does, you know. Tithe is all about recognizing that, hey, I've received a blessing from God, and so therefore this is what I'm doing in recognition that what I've received comes from God. Some of us don't even do that. And then those who give a tithe, we then turn around and give a tip. Oh boy. Whatever we put our hands in our pockets to pull out. Yeah? And there are some people that know how the faces feel. So no, that's Grantley face. That world face. John Redmond Vavel. This is like a here. And because of that, the work of God that should be advancing at a quick rate is hindered. Because, I'm going to say it, we are hoarding what God has given us to give to his cause. What else did they use? Oh, sorry. The abilities. They got some of us that got abilities and we sitting down on them. We ain't doing nothing in church. You know nothing? N-U-T-T-I-N-G, nothing. Sorry, N-U-T-T-E-N, nothing. Nothing we're doing in church. In church for 5, 10, 15 years, and we feel that unless we are elected to do something, we do nothing. When God has given you ability to use to further his cause. But you're saying no in church. Nobody want me to do nothing. They didn't ask me to do nothing. Volunteer yourself. Make yourself available. I got to blame the leaders for it sometimes, you know. Because we relegate people to reading scripture reading. You think reading scripture reading is something special? You can get little children to read scripture reading. Get the big people in the church to use their abilities to help further the cause of God. Because every single one of us in here, every single one of us, we all have abilities that God can use. I see your hand, sis. Just give me time. This is my moment now. This is the Spirit's moment now. Let him talk through me now. We're not using the abilities. 20% of the church doing 100% of the work. 60%, the other 60 or the 80% is who complaining and criticizing. We got people that got the gift of complaining. That's their ability. They know how to complain. Yeah. That's their ability. If you want somebody to complain, bring them. You know, like when you got friends who's got paid mourners, you get paid complainers. Bring them. So we just want you to come here and complain. 60%. And the other 20% just don't care. They've got Friday camp on a Sunday. They don't care. You're just like the children of Israel. What else? Talents and gifts. We just went through that one. Your body. Whoa, boy. We learned this week that the reason why God gave you a body and he gave you strength is to do his work. You think that you just get a body because God wants somebody that look good? God gave you a body because he wants you to do his work. And I'm going to say this one. The only time you retire from the work of God is when you're dead. You can never be too old to do the work of the Lord. You may not be able to walk around like before, but you can still do something. You can still use that body, that frame, to do something for the Lord. Woo! Use the influence. Use your influence. How many of us use our influence for good? And how many use our influence for otherwise? I ain't getting no there, man. They really can't teach me nothing. But you know, there are people, I don't know if it still happens in church, but help me to, you know that there are people who only serve, the nominating secretary calls them and asks them to serve in a particular position. Who's the head? Who's the head? Jesus is the head. What more head do you want? Am I talking sense? And then there's some people who, boy, the serve a Sabbath school superintendent, they're here every Sabbath morning, 9:10. 9:10, they're ready to start, you know. 9:10! The next year, the church don't ask them to serve as superintendent. They come in church at 11. And they're influencing people not to support. I don't agree with the elders and the pastors doing, so I ain't going nowhere. I can speak it. I live down here, no? I live in St. Philip. Exodus 35. All right, leave that. Exodus 35. After Moses had done all that he did, Moses said to them, okay, now, all those who want to give with a willing heart, come and give. Boy, the people start to bring. The people bring gold, they bring silver, they bring the ram skin and the hen skin and all sorts, and they're just bringing. to the men that were assigned the task, the responsibility, said to Moses, Moses, you got to tell the people, stop bringing out. The people finally vindicated God's trust in them to use the blessings in the correct way. You see, when God trusts us with blessings, He is trusting us not to take care of ourselves, but to take care of His work first. To take care of His work first. You want me to say it again? To take care of His work first. I can say that the whole day. Every blessing you receive is to be used for God first. And when we do what we do for God, we have to do all that God requires. You with me? We got to do all that God requires. You can't stop halfway. Because if everybody decides to stop halfway, it means that what God wants done will not be done. So you do for God, you give to God first, and you give all that God requires. And the beauty about it, right? When God blesses us, He blesses us with enough to do what He requires of us and still have enough left over for ourselves. You remember the lady at Zarephath? You remember that lady? You know that widow lady? Yeah, you remember the widow lady? That when Elijah wasn't a good-looking fella, no. Elijah didn't look cute. When Elijah came to ask that woman for water, Elijah was living by a brook for 3 years. For 2 years. Hey, boy, you good? All right. He was living for 2 years. There was no barber salon there. So Elijah buried it down there and he heard the long. So imagine, and he had no change of clothes. You feel that had a cave shepherd there that he could go and put on a nice suit. Not even an S.Y. Adams. And here is this unkempt man coming to a widow and saying to her, give me water to drink. And then he says, sir, he got the gall and the audacity to say to her, when you go inside, make me a little bread and bring it back. You must say, wait. As your God knows, that I only got a little meal and a little oil. I was about to make a little cake for me and my son. We will eat it, and then we can just lie down and wait till death comes. And listen to what Elijah says. Give to me first. No. Some of you won't believe, some of you not going to agree with me, but this is what I believe happened. I believe that woman took that handful of flour and that little bit of oil and made one bread and took that one bread and give it to Elijah. I believe that. There's some people that feel that when she only made half a bread and she made half with half and half. No, I believe she gave Elijah all. And then Elijah told her, go back now and make for yourself and your son. And when she went back inside, she realized that there was another handful of flour. You really thought that she had a barrel of flour? There was another handful of flour. There was just enough. And every night she went to sleep, there was nothing in the flour bin. No oil in the cruise. But when she got up the next morning, there was a handful of flour. It's just enough to make what they needed for the day. God will take care of His children if His children give to God first. The problem with us is that we believe that the blessings belong to us and that we work hard for them, and so therefore we can do with them as we feel like, and we are missing out on other blessings that God may have in store for us. Let me see what I got there. The gold and the silver belongs to the And he could do what? Rain. Imagine if you look outside just now, you see bare grant leaves falling. How many people going outside and collect a grant leaf? Wait, let me ask that question because y'all didn't hear. If outside you look outside and you realize that you see Grant Lee Adams $100 bills falling from the sky, how many go outside and collect? Well, let me tell you, Pastor Haynes ain't playing cute. Pastor Haynes ain't resting on the microphone nice. And Pastor Haynes said, give me a minute, I'm coming back. You what are they counterfeit? You expect counterfeit money to come from heaven? God says he could rain it from heaven if he chose, but instead he has made you a steward. And you. You don't know. You. He has made all of us his steward. Not his entrusting us with means not to be hoarded. Oh boy. There's some of us. I'm not going to say all of us. But you know there's a saying, when you pelt a rock in a crowd of dogs, the one that get hit is holler. You ever heard that one, Elder Gary? Well, we can see how true it is now. There's some of us that got money on the bank and we have no purpose for it. We are hoarding it. We have no purpose for it. As far as we're concerned, it is just there. There's some churches like that. You're just taking it, collecting the offering and putting it on the account. Collecting the offering and putting it on the account. And then every board meeting asks the treasurer how much interest we gain. What's this? So what it says? The Lord does not propose to come to this world and lay down gold and silver for the advancement of his work. He supplies men with resources that by their gifts and offerings they may keep his work advancing. The reason God blesses us is to keep his work advancing. And anytime we use the blessings for any purpose other than keeping the work of God advancing first, we are misappropriating the blessings. And when we misappropriate the blessings, it is counted as robbery towards God. That's a serious thing. So there's no church that should say they don't have enough money. Because God has already placed in the church the resources that are necessary to move the work forward. But our problem is that we are not willing to give God first, and we are not willing to give God what he requires. Oh boy. The man said you're all selfish. I ain't putting myself in that. Not me. Not me. I put myself in that. He said, when the people say, Lucy selfish. But we are all innately selfish. Yeah? All of us selfish, you know. That's our nature. Every man, woman, and youth may become a treasure for the Lord and may be an agent to meet the demands upon the treasury. Every church member. Whoa. Every church member is bound by a covenant relationship with God to deny himself of every extravagant outlay of means. And then she says, just in case people say, well, what I buy is not extravagant. She says, let not the want of economy in home life render us unable to act our part in strengthening the work already established and in entering new territory. Every church member is bound by a covenant relationship with God to do all that is necessary to strengthen the work already established and to enter new territory. That's the purpose of the blessings. That's why you have time. That's why God blesses you with time. That's why He wakes you up every morning. That's why He has given you abilities and He's given you a spiritual gift. That's why He has given you a healthy body. And for those who body not healthy, he gives you the foods so that you can make it healthy. That's why He gives you money. Not so you can flaunt it and say that you're rich. He gives you money so that you can advance His cause. And if you got money laying down home on the bed, in the bank, tied up in all sorts of things, so that you can feel good about yourself and your accomplishments. And God's work is languishing. We have people, we have people in our community. I'm going to talk about these things. We have people in our community who are struggling to make ends meet. They may have found themselves in an unfortunate situation, and we as a church drive past in our big cars and our nice suits, and we do nothing to help them. Yet we open our doors and we sing, we are going off to the glory land. Are you listening to me, church? If as a church, we have the finances, that we have the funding, that we can help people in the community, and we are not doing it, then we are hoarding God's money. Question. Oh, no, you just the gentleman in the back. Wendy. Mm-hmm. When a project is to be done? Mm-hmm. When you say a project, you mean a church project? When a church project is to be done, why should you go to the lending institutions when the money is already there? And the problem with this is that we only decide we want to do a project on the day that we want to do on the day that we see the project is supposed to be done, or the day before. Are you with me? So we decide, okay, well, you know something? Let's change the roof. And we want to change it tomorrow. It means that you got to find the money somewhere if you want to change it tomorrow. But if you had looked at that roof 5 years before, and you had seen that that roof is becoming into a state of disrepair, and that 5 years' time it would need to be fixed, you would start setting aside some money every week. So that when it comes time to fixing the roof, you just have the money there. Yeah? Yes, Elder. Mm-hmm. Correct. We gotta take those up. We gotta take those up and run with them. Listen to what Sister White says. Woo-hoo-hoo, just in case we get in powerful with ourselves. God, listen, read it for me. God is not dependent upon man for the advancement of his cause. You understand that? God don't need you. He is not dependent on you. If you think that because you got a little money that God dependent on you, and you can use your money to intimidate people, and use your educational background to intimidate people, and use the fact that you're poor to make people sympathize with you. We use all we can to try to influence and try to get things our way. Because we think that God dependent on us. God not dependent on you at all. She says he could have made angels the ambassador of his truth. He might have made known as well as he proclaimed the law from Mount Sinai with his own voice. But in order to cultivate a spirit of benevolence in us, he has chosen men, chosen to employ men to do his work. The only reason why God is using us is because he wants to stop us from being selfish. And when you're ready, when you're willing to give up your time so that somebody else, we talk about, yes, I use the blessings of Lord to bless others. How many people you bless with them? You bless your family. You bless people that you know can bless you back. How many take the blessings and look for the poorest lady in the community and say to her, listen, I'm gonna buy you food every week. Huh? But if a friend of yours who got money come and ask you to borrow $2,000, you will give him, because you know that if you want $2,000, you can get back from him. You call that the gift to get program. Are you listening to me? When God blesses us, it is to advance his cause and to move his work forward. And what is the work of God? Preach the gospel to the poor. Heal the brokenhearted. Set at liberty those that are captive. Bring recovery of sight to the blind. Help those who are bruised. That's the work of God. The work of God is not having socials. We have churches in this island that spend more money in socials than they spend in evangelism. You understand? Spend more money in entertainment than they spend in evangelism. Spend it on themselves. Also, at the end of the year, they got a big banquet. Hello. And don't bring a poor person from the community and say, listen, we celebrating, we having this banquet in your honor. What you do is let the community service give them a little hamper, tell them, all right, that for y'all. But we going to Hilton and have a big banquet and eat some pigtail rice. You understand that? I want us to understand how serious this thing is, Where? She put it there too. None can enter heaven whose characters are defiled by the foul blood of selfishness. Therefore, God tests us here by committing to us temporal blessings, that our use of these may show whether we can be entrusted with eternal riches. And he read that we going boy, some of we boy. Me and that if you don't know what to do with the seven days that God gave you, and you only setting apart 2 or 3 hours out of that whole week to worship God, what are you going to do for eternity? What are you going to do? You mean to tell me for the whole eternity you only spend 2 or 3 hours worshiping God? Because what you practice down here is what you're going to do in heaven or no? Thank God that there won't be no chickens running around in heaven. Hello? Thank God or no? I can tell you all there ain't no KFC nor no Chefette in heaven, please. All right? Nor in the new earth. It's only fruits. Hallelujah. Time for me to finish. The Lord designs that the means entrusted us shall do what? Shall be used in building up his kingdom. His goods are entrusted to his stewards that they may be carefully managed and bring back a revenue to him in the saving of souls. What's the purpose of the blessings? The purpose of the blessings is for me to carry forward the work of God. You agree with that? Come on, do you agree with that? Do you believe? Okay, let me just start there. Do you believe that God is the one who blesses you? Have you believed that? Put your hand in the air. Yeah, put your hand high. Put your hand high. Put your hand high. Don't be frightened. Put your hand high. Yeah. Do you believe and do you agree that God blesses you because he wants you to advance his work? Yeah? Stand. Is it your desire that from now on you will either continue or you will start using the blessings that God has blessed you with for the purpose that God has given you for? If that's your desire, join me. Join me right here. If that's your desire. Come. I can go a little higher so that you get enough space. Come. If that's your desire, come. I ain't singing a song. I ain't playing the music. Come up. Where we all here, look. All here. All here, look. All here space. All here, look. All here space, look. There are people who are coming because they want everybody in front here. So let them come. Come, look, you stand up all here, look. All here, sis. Come all here. You can stand up on top here, man. Come up. You can. Pastor, you can't stand up on top here. Well, okay, just stand. Come up a little more. So the lady frightened to stand up on top here. Huh? What happened when they want to come close to the holy place? Come up. Look, because you see there are people there in the aisle that I want come right up. Come up. All this is space, so come right up. Because there are a lot of people there who wanna. There are a lot of people who want to be part of this. Just let her stand right at the front. Let her stand right at the front there. Yeah, she can sit down right there. She wants to stand. Okay. Yeah. Just bring her some more to you. Right. Come right up. I don't want to see the oil block. Because we take these appeals very, very, very seriously, you know. I believe that when an appeal is made, it is not just the man of God talking because he has nothing else to say. I believe it's God wanting to see whether his people are willing to make a decision for him or not. And whether you're doing it already, there's nothing wrong with walking to the front because you want to be able to publicly say, yes, I am willing to do that. But if you stay in your seat, you're saying to God, not me. Not today. I can do what you want to do with the blessings that you give to me. Come back. All that space right there. Come. Y'all frightened to walk up. Go along up. Keep straight up. Listen, Pastor, he's calling you now. This is the Spirit speaking to you. So if the Spirit talking to your heart and you're disobeying Pastor Haynes, you're disobeying the Spirit. The Spirit tell you this morning that the blessings you receive is to carry forward God's work. If you've not been doing it before, it's time to start doing it. And all I'm asking is, if you want to say to the world, I'm going to start using God's blessings in the way that I want to use, I want you to come to the front. Just walk to the altar. Yeah, walk to the altar. Parents, don't go up there and leave your children, no. Go right through that space, right through that space there. Because there's more people that need to come, and that will come. You know what Moses said? All who are on the Lord's side, follow me. Heads are bowed. Eyes are closed. If there's somebody who still want to walk to the front, they can still go. There's still space at the altar. Because this is the opportunity not only to walk to the front to say, God, I want to do it, but it's also an opportunity to say to God, God, I want you to do it because without you, I can't get it done. Who else believes that they can't get it done? But they need God to help them. If you believe that and you believe you can't get it and you need God to help you, just walk to the altar. Be a prayer for you. Be a prayer for you. Loving Father, we don't even deserve to be called your children. Because there's nothing we can do to make ourselves worthy of that name. We're selfish. We're covetous. We are self-seeking. That's who we are. That's who we are because of sin. But we thank you for Jesus. Because Jesus came, he was tested. He overcame. He died, and he's risen again. He's coming back for people who are ready to meet him. People who will be tested. People who will overcome. People who will transform and who will allow their lives to be transformed from selfish, covetous worshippers of mammon to earnest, faithful co-workers with God in the salvation of man. And so we thank you for your grace, Father, because it is only by your grace that we can stand before this altar, recognizing that all that we have and all that we are belong to you. And you have entrusted us with these things. You have entrusted us with these things, Lord, so that we can just advance your cause. So that we can lead men and women to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. So that we can help men and women build an intimate relationship with you. So we can help men and women integrate you in their lives so that they will be Christians, not just on Sabbath morning, but they'll be Christians throughout the week. And so we thank you for the blessings that you have placed in our lives. Maybe in the past we misunderstood the purpose for these blessings, but today has been clearly shown to us that the reason we are blessed is to further your cause. And as we stand with that commitment in our minds, Lord, that our time our talents and abilities, our giftedness, our bodies, our influence, and our money, the money that you have blessed us with, that we're going to put you first. When it comes to deciding what we'll do with time, we'll put you first. When it comes to deciding how we'll manage our gifts and use our abilities, we'll put you first. When it comes to keeping our bodies, we'll put you first. When it comes to our influence, we'll put you first. When it comes to our money, we'll put you first. Because it is the passionate desire of all of our hearts to see your work just moving forward. We want to see people saved. We want to see people having a happy and a healthy relationship with God. We want to see people loving to come to church and loving to worship and loving to witness. That's what we want to see. We want to be part of a church that is impacting its community in such a way that every member of the community feels blessed to have a church like us in the presence. That's what we want to see. And we recognize that you didn't need to call us, but because you want us to be like you, you placed a call in our lives. And we have answered that call. And now we are covenanting and we are committing to and with you to put you first. We know it won't be easy, because you said that straight is the gate. You said in this world we'll have tribulations, but you have overcome the world. So we will expect trials. We will expect challenges. But intertwined and twisted and mingled with all of that is our faith in you. Our trust that you are still in control and that you will work all things for good for those that love you. So take our gifts, Lord. Take our lives. Mold and shape and fashion as you see fit. Cut off what needs to be cut off. Remove what needs to be removed. Add on what you need to add on. Do whatever you want to do with us, because we are yours. And we bring all that we possess with us and lay it at your feet, saying, do with it and do with us as you see fit. We thank you for victories. We thank you for overcoming power. And we thank you for the assurance that as long as we remain faithful to you, that one day coming soon, we shall all stand like we are standing here on the sea of glass. And we will sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. And we will reign with you eternally. So thank you, Father, for trusting us now with these temporal blessings, so that we can transform our lives, so that you can trust us with eternal riches. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen and amen.
sure that you are all indeed blessed to be here this Sabbath, right? Yes? Hands up of those who are blessed. You can say amen as well. Amen. Yes, we are blessed to be here in the house of God another Sabbath. Now, Pastor Haynes has blessed us with a very timely and very interesting presentation today, right? Did he? You can respond. Yes, good. Now we have two more presentations coming up. One more? Okay, one more presentation. One more presentation, but before he comes to give us another presentation or his last presentation, we're going to be blessed with a special item of music by Brother Jermaine Atwell.
Testing one. Testing one. Testing.
The deacons and deaconesses to collect this morning's offering at the same time. And we will sing the song we've been singing all week. I hope it's not the closing song, but if we can do it again too. 625, 625. My prayer, my aim is higher ground. Higher, Lord lift me up, Lord lift me up, and Lord plants my feet on higher ground. My heart has no where doubts arise, and faith me up, and I shall stand. Tears right now, so don't wait until you to live above the world. Though Satan's stars at me are hurt, for faith has caught the joyful sound, the song of saints. I shall stand by faith on heaven's table land, a higher, the utmost height, and catch a gleam of glory bright. Pray till heaven have found to higher ground. Lord, lift me on high. Chorus again, Lord, lift me up. And I shall stand by faith on heaven. Let's bow our heads as we pray. Loving Heavenly Father, we are so thankful, God, that you have given to us. You have been gracious enough, Father, that we have the ability to give today. And as a result, God, we want to worship you in our giving. We have done so, Father, right before us today the tithes and offerings, the gifts that we have given to you. We ask a special blessing upon it, Lord. We ask that your church would grow as a result. We ask that your work would grow as a result. We pray, Father, that those whom it will touch will be benefited as a result. And certainly, God, your name would be glorified in all the earth. I ask, God, that you would continue to be with those, Father, who are giving their all to you. It doesn't have to be in terms of money, but they're giving of their time. They're giving of their abilities. They're giving all to you, dear Father. Bless us in a tremendous way once again. And certainly, Father, because we are blessed, we will in turn bless others. Thank you for hearing our prayer today. In Jesus' name.
Check 1, 2, check.
Okay, at this time, I want to invite those who will be doing the announcements for the 3 churches to come to the front so that after I'm finished here, that you guys can come on to do your announcements. So that is persons from Capeville, Northern Light, and Chatsall. Thank you. At this time, we have a number of visitors in our midst. So when you hear your name, please stand so that we can welcome you. Of course, we have Pastor and Sister Haynes. We have Damian Adams and Michelle Adams. They're from the Black Rock SDA Church.
Test 1, 2, 1, 2.
Special Stewardship Week. All right. So at this time, I'm going to invite those persons who will be doing the announcements to please come forward.
Good morning, church. Pleasant Sabbath to you. I would kindly like all the members from the Chancel Church to kindly listen to your announcements for today. This evening, members are encouraged to support our adventurers at the Northern Light Church for the induction service. All members of the Personal Ministries Committee and the Personal Ministry Council are also reminded of their very important meeting tomorrow evening at 4:30. On Tuesday morning, we continue. Sorry, well, this now sounds better. Wednesday night prayer and study continues this Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Remember, more prayer, more power to resist the enemy of our souls. Next Sabbath, we will be having our community service guest day. Please invite your friends, neighbors, and relatives to be part of this special service. The group Christian Soldiers wishes to thank all who contributed and supported their social last week. And we are reminded to continue praying for Sister Jacqueline Hollisworth, who is on the mend from her fractured ankle. And my final announcement is, Please note that it was Sister Sonia's Allen's mother-in-law and not her mother who is in hospital. We are kindly reminded to keep her in our prayers. Thank you for listening, and do have a blessed Sabbath.
Good morning, everyone. The following announcements are for the members of the Northern Light Adventist Church. Fieldwork continues this afternoon at 3 p.m. So this afternoon at 3 p.m., we'll be going into the field to continue our fieldwork. The zonal induction service begins this afternoon at 4 p.m. We look forward for the support of all the churches. Please save the date. The church has planned a hike for Sunday, the 21st of April at 5 a.m. All are invited to walk with us. There will be no Sunday evening service tomorrow evening. However, prayer and Bible study continues this upcoming Wednesday night at 7:15 p.m. All members, and I say all members, are especially encouraged, especially those of the crusade team, to come on out and be part of this prayer and Bible study as we prepare for the Good News Evangelistic Seminar starting the 19th of May. The funeral service of Sister Jilt's brother will take place on Monday, the 8th of April at 10 a.m. at the Christchurch Parish Church. So, please support Sister Jilt's and as she grieves her brother. The Northern Light Church will be celebrating its Religious Liberty Day on the 27th of April, and we are inviting the brethren to join us. If not in the morning, then the evening. It promises to be very informative. The final announcements are per request. Please keep Sister Sonia Edwards, Valerie Edwards, who is presently in Miami, awaiting surgery for her eyes, in your prayers. And a final prayer request, please remember Sister Jills, who is grieving the loss of her brother and her brother-in-law in prayer. Here ends all the announcements. Do enjoy the remainder of your day.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, this afternoon, there will be the induction service for the adventurers in the North Zone. This will be held at the Northern Light Seventh Adventist Church. Please, the request is please come and give our little ones some support. This program starts at 4 p.m. and so there will be no service here this afternoon. Now the Adventurers and the Pathfinders and the Youth Society of the Indian Ground Seventh Adventist Church, they'll be putting on a concert tomorrow at the Mulna Quarter Church. This particular concert starts at 3:30 p.m. Now, all of us are aware of camp meeting. Camp meeting starts on the 17th of April and goes to the 21st of April, 2019. And on Wednesday night is the 17th, Wednesday the 17th, sorry, that will commence our camp meeting. It starts at 6:30 p.m. and goes to 9 p.m. On the Friday night at 7 p.m., it is hoped that all of our churches, those who are not joining those at Oldbury, will participate in a communion service. This is on the 19th, the Friday night. On the 28th of April, Sunday the 20th of April, the Seventh Adventist Secondary School alumni will sponsor a flea and farmers market at the Seventh Adventist School that is in Dalkeith. This effort starts at 10 a.m. and goes to 5 p.m. In connection with the crusade at Oldbury. The invitation is extended to those between the ages of 15 and 35. They're looking to have a 100-voice youth choir, and the first rehearsal is tomorrow at the Black Rock Seventh Adventist Church. The time, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. These announcements are now specifically for KFIL. Tomorrow evening at 5:30 p.m., there will be a Bible Workers Workshop. Bible Workers Workshop. So all of those of us who want to be part of the Bible Workers Workshop, it starts at 5:30 p.m. And our Sunday night service will start at 6:30 p.m. Please don't forget our Wednesday night prayer meeting. The program starts at 7:30 p.m. and our Friday night Bible study, 7:30 p.m. The men's and women's ministries directors, they would like to thank all of those who supported the effort, the social on Saturday night. The men were in one place, locality initially, and then we went over to join the ladies in Whole Town, and so we had a very good time. So the men's and women's ministries directors, they would like to thank those who would have supported that particular effort. On Monday coming, Sister Maria Rock will be going to the hospital for surgery. Please remember her in your prayers. Please also remember Brother and Sister Rock, Brother Barry, Sister Ruth, Sister Johnson. These are the shut-ins in our midst. As from next week, the not personal ministries, the community services director, he'll be placing some barrels in some locations in the church. One barrel is for foodstuff. The other barrel is for toiletries. This is in an effort to build up our stock with respect to disaster preparedness and also to touch the lives of those in our community who are less fortunate. Brother Patrick Linton, the education director, he would like to meet, I would have made this announcement last week, he would like to meet with the parents of those who attend the Seventh Adventist schools. He would like to meet with you immediately after service today. And we would also like to announce that on the 27th of April, we'll be celebrating Education Day here at KFIL. These are all the announcements for today. Yeah, these are all the announcements for today. I hope and pray that we would have listened to them and we would have retained them.
Okay, we have a number of birthdays in our midst. We have Brother Lomarot, he would have celebrated, Brother Lomarot and Brother Peter Taylor would have celebrated on the 4th, right? On the same day. So at this time, we're going to ask you to stand so that we can sing the birthday song for you. We have a Zari Baino from Chance Hall. Anyone from Northern Light or any other persons from Chance Hall who would have celebrated their birthdays this week? You can stand so that we can sing the birthday song for you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. May the good Lord bless you. May the good Lord bless you. May the good Lord bless you. Happy birthday to you.
May God continue to bless each and every one of you. At this time, we're going to be favored with a special item of music by Brother Jermaine Atwell.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. There is coming a day when no heartache shall come, no more clouds in the sky, no more tears to dim the eye. All is peace forevermore on that happy golden shore. What a day, glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. When I look upon his face, the one who saves me by his grace, when he takes me by the hand and leads me through the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be. There will be no sorrow there, no more burdens to bear, no more sickness, no more pain, no more parting over there, and forever I will be with the one who died for me. Oh, what a day, glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. Oh, when I look upon God's face, the one who saves me by his grace, when he takes me by the hand and leads me through the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. Oh, when I look upon God's face, the one who saves me by his grace, when he takes me by the hand and leads me through the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be. Oh, what a day, glorious day that will be.
Good morning, church. We'll just sing two hymns this morning before we continue our service. And let us begin with number 9. Let all the world in every corner sing, my God and King. And for this hymn, for the verses, we're going to sing, let all the world in every corner sing, my God and King. We'll sing that together. The heavens are not too high, his praise may thither fly. Ladies, those lines are yours. The earth is not too low, his praises there may grow. Men, that's you. So I want to hear the bass really coming through. And then let all the world in every corner sing, my God and King. We go together. So if you forget, don't worry. I will cue you. Number 9. Let's sing together. Let all the world in every corner sing, my God and King. Ladies, the heavens are not too high, his praise may thither fly. Men,
the earth is not too low, his praises there may grow.
Together. Let all the world in every corner sing, my God and King. Let all the world in every corner sing, my God and King. Ladies, the judgment psalms must shout, no door can keep them.
Gentlemen, but above all heart, they must bear the longest part.
Together, let all the world in every corner sing, my God and King. Amen. Let us turn to number 439, How Far From Home, number 439. We'll sing the first 2 stanzas and the last stanza. Let's sing. How far from home I have gone, I bent my steps, the watchman spake, the long dark night is almost gone, the morning soon will break. Then weep no more, but speed thy flight, with hope's bright star, thy guiding ray, till thou shalt reach the realms of light in everlasting day. I asked the warrior on the field, this was his soul, inspiring song, with courage bold, the sword I'll wield.
the battle is not long. Then weep no more, but well endure the conflict till the work is done. For this we know the prize is sure when victory is won. Stanza 4. Not far from home, a blessed thought, the traveler's lonely heart to cheer, which off the healing balm has brought, and dried the mourner's tear. Then weep no more, since we shall meet where weary footsteps never roam, or trials past, or joys complete, safe in our Father's home.
Amen.
Praise the Lord. We're not far from home.
Don't move yet, Pastor. We have something very special to do before you present. Just responsible. Sister Erla, Sister Michelle, Sister Merleys. Michelle is here.
Sister Hands, please come. Good afternoon, church. Oh, it's a minute to 12. Good morning, church. Pastor Haynes and Sister Haynes, first I want to say thank you, Sister Haynes, and thank you to God for lending Brother Haynes, Pastor Haynes, this week, so that he could have inspired us, encouraged us on this Christian pathway and how to be more faithful to God. We want to thank you. Pastor Haynes, on behalf of the pastor and the members of the Chance Hall, Caveville, and the Northern churches, we would like to present you a token of our appreciation, because only a God man, a man who loved the Lord, always on time, could have taken that trek from St. Philip to St. Lucie every night, and on time. Your presentation was different. It was inspiring, educational, and very interesting, encouraging us to keep faithful to God. And I like the part, especially when you put us in groups where we have to have a vision for what we were doing in the church that impacted us a lot. And we thank you for the knowledge that God has imparted upon you that you could have shared it with us. We want to thank you very much.
On behalf of our pastor and the members of the 3 churches, I want to present you with this small token of our appreciation for coming this holy and sharing with us. As the lady just said, it was very informative, especially for me. I have learned a lot. Amen. Praise.
And Pastor Haynes, you were talking all morning. You must have read our minds. God always has a special part in our hearts for you. This is a special token. You say God always provides something extra. That is something extra that God has provided for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me just express appreciation and gratitude now that before I start the final presentation for all those who came out. It was indeed a wonderful time we had. There's only one thing I ask. Just put all that what we have taught you into practice. Yeah, I'm going to be checking with your pastor from time to time. We started at 10%. And we're hoping that in 6 months' time we can get that up to 30-40%. If we can do that, that'd be wonderful. But it would require every single member of the body of Christ doing what they're called to do. Every single member of the body of Christ doing what they're called to do. Every single member of the body of Christ doing what they're called to do. Every single member of the body of Christ doing what they're called to do. Amen. And everyone has a role. So thank you very much. Truly appreciative of the opportunity to come and share with you. The distance is no problem. I go to Dominica. So if I can go to Dominica, I recently went to St. Martin, and I ran a similar church week in St. Martin. Yeah, so that's two planes that I had to take. So that coming down to St. Lucie is not that far. I can't even get that one slip in there, man. All right, we had a very interesting week. It's now 12 o'clock. I promise the guys that I'm going to try to get you out of here by 11. Remember, I mean at 1, not 11. At 1 and a 1. A minute past 1. That means we're talking about a minute past 1. I'm going to try to get you out here by 1 o'clock. I know that you would have questions to ask. I'm going to try to ask them as expediently as possible. And hopefully that by the time we're finished, we'll be able to know. There's one more presentation that I may have to come back and do, Pastor. It's called Protecting the Lifestyle. Yeah, protecting the lifestyle. We talked about strengthening and utilizing and organizing and financing, but it's called Protecting the Lifestyle. And I think it's a presentation that we all need. So we'll have to talk about that and see when I'll be free to come back down this side to do that. Okay, come back this side. All right, so what we did this week, we had a wonderful time. We wanted to show stewardship from another angle, but so it was basically showing how we can use the stewardship principles in the practical running of the church. We all understand that we have gifts and abilities. Our spiritual giftedness is matched with our abilities and come into ministries. These ministries make up what we call our departments. Now, in order for us to have an impact on the society or an impact in the community as we would like, we believe that we must be focused on what we need to do. Amen? Yeah, we must be purposeful. We must be intentional about what we need to do. And so, therefore, we said that we wanted every department to have a vision of how they see their department functioning. Right? So they know where they are now, but where they would like to be in 3 years' time. All right, and then they will work on. So these are some of the visions that we came up with, and you know you're larger now, so you'll be able to tell me if you agree with them, if you think that they're good. So this is the leadership vision, the vision of the leadership. I'm hearing some echoing. Okay. Oh, yeah, you would need this one. All right, it says, I see a church with a strong outreach. This means a spiritual church. Outreach, reaching God. We see a church that is strong spiritually, where every member is equipped for and engaged in loving ministry, caring for its members and its community. Is that a church you would like to be part of? Come on, is that a church you would like to be part of? Yeah, that's a church that we live. We want to see everybody being spiritually strong. We want to see everybody caring for each other, not only in the church, but caring for those in your community as well. Here's the Person Ministries vision. Their vision is to work in unity with all departments and every member of the church to effectively evangelize and to actively fulfill the Great Commission of Jesus in all the neighboring communities. Amen. Amen. I like. Oh, they're nice. Deaconry now. This is the deaconry. To see a unified church community that is reverent. That is what? Reverent and respects authority, as well as meeting the needs of the members and of the shut-ins. That's the role of the deaconry, and that's what they see. That's what they see. So the deaconry now, you realize that they didn't say in that they see a deaconry that collects offering. You realize that? That is part of it. Or you realize that they didn't say we see a deaconry that fixes the toilet when they won't fix it. But they understand the role of the deaconry. And then we have the community service. The vision statement is to see the best community church through caring, sharing, and giving. Each one has to reach one to make disciples for Christ. So we're talking about the community services now impacting the community and making disciples for Christ. Amen. Are you agreeing with some of these visions? Come on, is this where you would like to see your church going? Yeah, in 3 years' time? So this is the youth now. The vision of the youth is to see our youth adopt the 3 C's. Well, they have 5 C's that night. The 3 C's, caring, confident, and creative, are connected to Christ. Yeah? Yeah, that's the vision. They want to see young people who are connected to Christ, who are confident, who are caring, and who are creative. Youth who maintain and are always connected to Christ, to be well equipped to evangelize frequently, to save souls for Christ, and are accepted, supported, and encouraged by other members of the church. Amen. Y'all frightened to say amen. I know what's happened. Once 12 o'clock gone, but don't want to say amen in church, you know. There's one say one amen. That's the amen in church there. Sabbath school sees a Sabbath school as a means of transforming lives by the studying of Scripture. So they see Sabbath school members who are studying the Scriptures, studying the spirit of prophecy, who is coming in contact with God, who is allowing their hearts to be transformed and their intellects to be transformed to help them to live victorious lives. That's a beautiful Sabbath school. Yeah, that's a beautiful Sabbath school. I love that. And then there's the treasury. Ooh, there's our treasury clerk and communications. Our vision, they see technology being effectively utilized within the church operations, computerization of the church's records, budget submission by departments. Let me see hands of those all who are department heads. You're a department head. Stand so that I can see you. You're a department head. It doesn't matter which church. These are your department heads here? You don't got more department heads than this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're popping up slowly, man. I'm going to say this one very, very slowly. It is your responsibility to submit a well thought out budget to the stewardship committee to plan the budget for the church. Gone are the days when you will say to the treasurer, allocate something to me. When you say that, it means that all that Pastor Haynes has said over the last week didn't rain down on in your brain. It means you have to plan. You have to do what? You have to do what? You have to plan. So, Pastor, from now on, in fact, what I believe is that every department head now should go back and look at their budget. And if they have not formulated activities for that budget as well as yet, sit down and formulate activities for that budget. Amen. Oh, I was supposed to stay. Amen. I think that's where you do. Sit down. Have a seat. Have a seat. Thank you very much. So you understand your responsibility. All right? So they want to see budget submission by departments, use of digital currency. Well, we're not talking about Bitcoin, but he's basically talking about we want to be. They want to be able to see the church come to a point where they have less cash to count, which adds security to their system. Because the more money that they have to count, it means that they have to go and deposit in the bank, and the greater the probability that something can happen. So if you can, they want to be able to implement ways that you can give your tithe and your offering without having to put cash in the plate. You will still return with your tithe slip and envelope. But that's a good vision as well. Development of a website, a web page, and the use of technology in communicating with church members. So that when an announcement comes in today, if they get the announcements on Tuesday, the church member doesn't have to wait until Sabbath. It's automatically sent to you. Y'all live in the caveman days or something, man. Or this cave. But that's sweet that you don't have to wait until Sabbath to hear an announcement. That from the time that announcement comes in, boom, it's sent to your device. Wow. That'd be lovely. That'd be lovely, boy. Pastor, when you start to do that down here, let me know. Yeah. Prayer ministries, even the prayer ministries will involve a team of spiritually mature, dedicated students of God's word, effectively responding to needs of church and community through intercessory prayers at church and visits to encourage at people's homes. That's wonderful. This is something new to y'all, or? Yeah. That's what we need. That's what we need our people to be doing, so that they will have something to move towards and work towards. Amen. It says the vision gives you focus. I think that was the last one. I love those visions. If you're in favor of all those visions and you feel that this is where you would like to see your church go, just put your hand in the air. All right, take your hands down. Those opposed, the same sign. It is carried. We know how the little business meeting there with all the district. So we want to encourage you to follow up on those visions, objectives, and do a wonderful work. Now, brethren, when all of the departments have come together and they have put their plans in place, there's one very important thing that needs to be in there, and we call it what? Not for me? Yeah, just sit down. What's the most important? What not the most? What is the very important thing that needs to come in there in order for the work to continue? Prayer. Yeah, we have prayer. What else? Working together. Well, y'all playing. I don't want to call it, but let me call it for y'all, man. Money, man. Money. You tell me money? Oh, all right. But she said money. Oh, you thought I was talking about money? No, today talking about money. I ain't talking about money. Yeah, so we're talking about money now, right? We understood just now from our previous presentation that the Lord blesses us with money to do what? Come on, church. Blesses us with money to do what? Carry forward his word. That's the purpose of money. That's why you get Grant Lees and Barrows and what are the other men? And John Redmond. And Prescott. And checks. All right. Definition of stewardship. Stewardship is the lifestyle of one who accepts Christ's lordship, who are walking in partnership with God, and who are acting as his agent on the affairs on the earth. The affairs of God is to do what? Lead people to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, helping people to build intimacy with God, helping people to integrate God in their lives. That's the business of the church. That's the work of the church. That is God's affairs. That's God's business. And every single member, you are an agent to manage God's affairs. Amen. That's a special responsibility. God is our foundation. Spiritual walls gives us durability, security, and purpose. Spiritual walls, spiritual gifts is what is my ministry. What am I good at doing? Organizing means that we have to effectively plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Yeah, we're going quickly. You have your ministry, therefore, must have a vision, and then you must have objectives to achieve the mission and the vision. To achieve the mission and the vision. How do I efficiently use my stewardship lifestyle? I use my stewardship lifestyle by proper time management. Sister White says that if we were to value the time that we had, we would have more than enough time to do what God requires and still have time for ourselves and for the world. But it's just that we don't value the time. You know how much time we spend aimlessly doing nothing? Nothing. Do you know that? At the end of the day, just check back how many hours you just spent sitting down doing nothing. Nothing. Just fritter them away. Because time is short, this is what Sister White says, we must work with diligence and double energy. She says there are souls to be won to Christ. There's a great and solemn work before us to prepare people to stand in the day of the Lord. We have but little time here, and the best use we can make of our faculties is to consecrate them to the work of God. That's the best use we can make of our time, is to consecrate it to the work of the best use. It means not even working for yourself is the best use. You get that? The best use is to consecrate it for the work of God. Get that, youngster? All right. It is the duty of all, not only of those who occupy the position of watchmen and walls of Zion, but of all the laymen also, to do their utmost to advance the cause of God and save their fellow man. Now we're going fastly, quickly. And misuse of the body shortens the period of time which God designed shall be used in His service. So we eat healthy, not to be said that we eating healthy, but because we want our bodies to be healthy so that we can use them for God. And if we misuse, if we eat the wrong foods, or if we eat the foods that we shouldn't eat, and cause our bodies to fall into sickness, we are robbing God of time that if we were well enough, we'd be able to use for His service. I shouldn't read that one. Let me say, those who use flesh meats freely do not always have an unclouded brain and an active intellect, because the use of the flesh of animals tends to cause a grossness of body and to benumb the finer sensibilities of the mind. The liability to disease is increased by flesh eating. We do not hesitate to say that meat is not essential to the maintenance of health and strength. You got that? I ain't going to say anything else about that. That one straight. But you know that if I have pulled something from Ellen White that said you should keep the Sabbath holy, all of them would have said amen. All of them would have given say, amen, yes, we ought to keep the Sabbath. I know tell them something else. She said, stay away from flesh food. And everybody, So now we come to a financial lifestyle. She says God's people are called to a work that requires money and consecration. The obligation resting upon us holds us responsible to work for God to the utmost of our ability. He calls for undivided service, for the entire devotion of heart, soul, and mind. We saw this one earlier, so I'm not going to read that one. We saw this one just now as well. The Lord does not propose to come down to the world to lay down gold and silver for the advancement of His cause. He supplies men with the resources that by their gifts and offerings that they may keep His work advancing. We finance the ministry through the use of the church budget. We talked about that last night. The budget is submitted from the church. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly because we did this during the week. Any budget that's not voted at the business meeting is null and void. All right? And all budgets must balance. When we give to who? When we give to who? We give to God. We don't give to projects. We don't give to departments. We give to God, which means that we give to the budget, and the budget then distributes the funds according to the needs of the church. I like to put it this way. Come, can I use you? Come, let me use you. Come. Yeah, let me use you, man. I'm saying down there, looking like a pretty boy fly. Let me use you, man. Huh? He's combined budget. That's his name, right? What's his name? Combined budget. All right? Now, your responsibility as combined budget is to take care of all the needs of the church. Yeah? Everybody got that? Yeah, that's your responsibility. But if the church doesn't put into the combined budget, it means that the needs can be met. Come, Barney. It's a cheese on, brothers. That's a Bajan terminal. That's how you know Bajans overseas, man. That's a one her and cheese on, brothers. He is. Let me choose. He is a department. That's with his name. Any department. All right? No, I call him no department. Call nobody said that. I call nobody department. He is person ministries. He is person ministries. Now watch it. Combined budget takes care of everybody. Right? But if you take your offering and you put it only in person ministries, then only money will be spent on person ministries, and poor pretty boy Floyd, combined budget, will have nothing to give to the other churches. Right? So in order for everybody to be satisfied, it means that we must give to the combined budget. Amen? Amen? Amen. Thank you, Barney. Thank you, pretty boy Fly. That's my friend. I know your friend. Tell me he's small. Small, so. Yeah. No, he tall also. Yeah, he passed me. So when we give to the budget. We give to the budget. Sorry, when we give, we are not giving to the... when we give, we are giving to God. And so since the church is acting on God's behalf, that's why we give it to the church. Right? All right, let's continue. So let's look a little bit at tithes and offering. God is the giver of... He's the giver of all our benefits and has a claim upon them all. That his claim should be our first consideration. And that's one say, when we give, we are giving to God. And I'm going to say this one really, really nice. Don't think that when you're giving tithe so that you can pay the pastor. You understand? They got people that believe that when they stop giving tithe, the pastor can't get paid. Who telling this story, me or you? Anytime a person is only giving tithe because they're paying the pastor, they're giving tithe. If they're returning tithe, they recognize it's because it's a blessing from God, and they're recognizing God's blessing in their lives. But whether you return or whether you return or you don't return, this guy said about giving because he's an employee of the East Caribbean Conference. And as long as he remains an employee of the East Caribbean Conference, they are obligated to pay him. You with me? So if you get vexed because he ain't visiting you in 3 months, and you get vexed, and so, well, I ain't returning no more tithe because he ain't to get paid out of my money. It's your relationship with God that you're violating. And you will find yourself on the wrong side of time. You with me? All right, let's go quickly. In the great work of warning those who are the world, those who have the truth in their heart will act their same parts. They will be faithful in the payment of tithe and offerings. What is tithe? Tithe is 10% of our income. 10% of our gross income, if we are working for it. 10% of our blessing. When they talk about income, I'm not just talking about, because there are people who have the the notion that only people that work receive income. Whatever you receive as a blessing from the hands of God, you should return tithe on. You're with me? So when you get that $500 from your neighbor from your friend overseas through Western Union, they're not saying to you, but tell them when they get it, make sure that they're tithing. Everybody listening to me? I'm going to answer a question that everybody has asked me. So should pensioners return tithe? Y'all know the answer already? Wait, are you only hearing bare young voices saying yes or no? I ain't heard no old people say yes. All you people mouth shut up. All I'm hearing is bare young voices. But when we understand what pension consists of, people say, well, I have been given national insurance for my whole lifetime. Why should I have to return tithe on the pension? Because the pension you receive comes from three sources. It comes from your contribution, it comes from the employer's contribution, and it comes from the government's contribution. Now, if you want to decide, let me calculate how much my contribution is, so that I can only tithe on the employer's contribution and the government contribution, that's between you and God. But me personally, I don't feel that you should nitpick with God. Are you listening to me? I don't feel you should nitpick with God, because God has allowed you to find favor in the eyes of the government. Because the government is not obligated, You understand what I'm saying? And if you were to get pension based on what you contribute, you won't get nothing much at all. So we trust God. Yeah, and we return our pension. All right? Any questions on tithe? Have your pastors returned tithe? Wait, stop. Brethren, that's a trick question. That's a trick question. I can let you bring the real part that you want to bring. Tell me what you really want to tell me, man. The answer to that is yes. Yeah, the pastors return tithe. Yeah, pastors return tithe. Yeah, well, I return tithe. Pastor, you return tithe too, Pastor? Yeah. So right now, based on what we have here, two out of two pastors return tithe. So we return tithe. All right? Good? You want no more questions to ask after that one? But she's on. She want to know if you pay yourself. Tithes are returned from where? Tithes are returned from where? No. Tithes are returned from where? What is the real thing behind tithe giving and giving of offering? A willing heart. A willing heart. So if you put $1,000 in the plate, are you with me? And then you watch the plate. You watch the plate going from bench to bench. You watch the plate. You watch the deacon bring it up here. The deacon bring it here. You watch it, and you watch it when the treasurer come back for it. You watch the treasurer go. You watch it go downstairs, and a little tear come to you. You do like that. You have not given it with a willing heart. So I say this to everybody. And I make no bones about it. The conference deducts tithe from our salaries. Right? We sign the thing saying we are giving them permission to deduct the tithe. Right? Now, if a pastor signs that and he is not returning it with his heart, he has not yet returned tithe. Everybody understand that? So even though the conference may have taken it out before, if he did not return it with his heart, it was not a willing heart, he has not yet returned tithe. Amen. I want to put that to bed now. Pastor Nabang ain't ask you no more about that. Because you know that you return it with a tithe is a test of loyalty, recognizing that God is the owner of our life. So any questions on tithe? No question on tithing? Yes, sir. No, ask no hard questions, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it was always gross. Yeah, it was always gross. It was never net. Gross is what you get. Okay, let's understand this. Let's understand this. The only reason that you don't get the full income in your hand is because the government chooses to take out tax. Because if the government did not take out tax and they give you it fully, that would have been your gross income. Yeah, so it's your gross income. The government says, well, if you want to live in a society where when you call 211 or 311 or 511, you have the response of social personnel, then you have to pay for that. Amen? If you want your children to be taught by teachers who love and who care for them, then you have to pay for that. And all of that is why we pay taxes. Yeah? That's why we pay taxes. So really, truly, it's your gross income. It is what your employer says they will give you. So, but the government says, well, you see this man here? I feel that if I leave it up to him to give me tax, he ain't give me the tax. So I can take it out beforehand so that I can make sure that I get my tax. All right? So it's gross all the time. Yes, sir.
Does it matter where you return your tithes? The reason I said that, you're a member of a church, so you know pay your tithes to the church rather than the conference.
You left in the back there asking the hard questions to come here to ask the hard questions. You want to come all the way to Friday to ask me the hard questions, you know. All right. God appoints a place. God appoints a place for the tithes to be taken. God says, I will call a place. The tithes should be returned to the storehouse. The storehouse, as Seventh-day Adventists believe, the storehouse is the conference. Yeah? The storehouse is the conference. Right? But returning tithe is also an act of worship. I want you to listen. Returning tithe is also an act of worship. So when you return your tithe as part of the worship session in the church, yeah, you're participating in a worship activity. If you return it to the conference, I'm not too sure if you say a little prayer and say, Lord, bless this tithe as I give it to the cashier. I'm not too sure if you do that. But most people usually do that because they don't want the church to know how much money they're making. Well, if it comes to election time, no. If it comes to election time, see that young man there? You see that young man there? He can go to the treasury and say, Barney Boyce, he returned tithe recently, and they will say to him, the record says that he has, or the record says that he has not. No, not if it goes in the conference has a record of everybody. Yeah, the conference has a record. No. If the treasurer at the church doesn't see it, the conference has records that he returned it. Yeah. In fact, the conference has records that everybody returns. Yeah. The pastor can just go and ask for the records for his church, and he will look at the records and see who was returned and who hasn't returned. It's as simple as that. But as an act of worship, you really should return it in your church as part of the worship service. Yeah, as part of the worship service. Yes, sir. Conference? Mm-hmm. Okay, the question is how should a self-employed person return tithe? Let's say I'm gonna make an assumption. There's a hypothetical situation. I'm not saying that this is how much money you will get, because I don't want anybody come and ask you after church for a little handout. So let's say for a job, you're a carpenter, and for a job you are paid $5,000, then really and truly you return tithe on the $5,000 because that is your gross income. That's if you're a carpenter. That's if you're a carpenter. If you are a person who has a business, right? And obviously you will spend money to generate income, right? You have your income, you subtract the money that you have spent to generate the income, and you return tithe on your profit. Yeah? That's how it's done. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have a car note. I have mortgage. I have children at school and all those expenses. So by the time I'm finished even buying a little food, I have no money. What is your advice for me? Because I know that I have to return tithes. I know that it's God's will that I should, but I am broke after meeting all those commitments. And I've just come into church.
Why you tell people to ask questions for? I could have just do my presentation and go home and all. All right, that's a very interesting question, and it's a very real situation. It's a very real situation. God has never intended for tithing to be a burden. That's never his intention, right? It's never his intention. For a person like that, what I would say to them is, now that they have an understanding of what they're supposed to give to God as tithe and offering, they should keep track of it. You with me? They should keep track of it and sacrifice as much as they can against it. So let's say the person is supposed to return tithe of $200 every month, right? And each month they're only able to sacrifice $50. They're returning $50, but in their covenant relationship between them and God, they say, God, I understand that I still owe you $150. So that when the debts have been paid, they can then start to work on what they owe God. You see, tithing is all about recognizing that what you have received is a blessing from God. Now, it doesn't mean that if you can afford the $200 that you say, well, Pastor Haynes don't give me a way out. No. Pastor Haynes didn't give you no way out. Because when it all comes down, it is between you and God. It is between you and God. And God does not want to hit you over the head with a hammer. He just wants you to recognize that, hey, this is from me. And the mere fact that you put it aside and say, okay, this is how much I owe God, and as soon as I get enough money, I'm gonna give it back. Yeah, as soon as I get the opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
And a person finds themselves in that situation. How does the church help that person to get on track? I mean, not waiting until it's too bad, but then the stewardship and the pastor and whoever look at the records, they would have seen that the person is not doing what they're supposed to do. How do you help that person in that department? How do you help that person to get back on track?
I really should have done my presentations, you know. There's a fund in the church called the Benevolent Fund. Yeah? Every church should have a benevolent fund. The purpose of the benevolent fund is to assist the members of the church who are in need. That's the purpose of benevolent fund. So you can use something like that to help the person. Yeah. So let's say the pastor and the stewardship person visits the person. The person says, "Well, look, pastor, this is how much I have. I can return tithe, but it means that I will have nothing to eat." The pastor should say, "Well, trust God. You don't know what will happen." And if she trusts God, if the person exhibits that trust in God, the pastor or the church leader can say, "Listen, this is something that we just put aside to help you." You understand what I'm saying? It's all about trusting God. Yeah, it's all about trusting God. Yes, sir. You see, and that's why it's important that the leadership of the church visit the members of the church. Because if the leadership of the church visits the members of the church, when that name comes up, they would have been aware of the situation and they'll be able to say, okay, this person is good. Because at the end of the day, right, the chairman of the nominating committee and the treasurers who determine whether you return tithe or not. No? Am I right? Yeah, because they go and ask the treasurer say no or yes, up or down. So if the pastor, in talking with the elders, and the elders said, this is the situation with that person, and this is how we're helping that person, and this is what this person is doing, then they can say, sure, no problem, we can let that person serve. Yeah, but if the person is stubbornly unfaithful, yeah, I just put this up here so that we will know how the tithe is divided when it gets to the conference. Yes, sir. Oh, a tax man, boy. A tax man. Mm-hmm. That was a question or that was a statement? All right. Let me just say. I know of that principle. But I think in a case like that, that person is not intentionally withholding their tithe. I think that's a situation where the person has they now come to church. However, that principle is taken from Leviticus 27:31. If ought want to return his tithes and he needs to use it, he should add a fifth part onto it, right? Note that principle only applied to tithing of grain and never applied to tithing of sheep. It was only tithing of grain. Because let's say a man had 5 acres of land, right? He had 5 acres of land, and he reaped all his grain. But when he calculates the tithe, right? When he calculates the tithe and take the tithe out of what he should get, what he has left remaining is not enough to replant in the 5 acres. Everybody understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? Basically, it is if you plant peas, you take some of the peas and you eat. You take some peas and give away, and you take some peas and do what? Plant back, so you can get more peas. But let's say there's a case where it comes where you don't have enough peas to eat, you don't have enough peas to give away, but you just have enough peas that you can plant back to get more peas. Now let's say you have to give a tithe on those peas. That's Bible. That's Old Testament, right? You have to give on tithe on that. When you take out that tithe, you don't have enough peas to plant back so that you can get a good crop next time, right? What you do is that you take the value of those peas, right? Add a fifth part onto it and return it to the priest and take the peas and plant back so that you will have enough. That was the principle that was being established there. No, that's not. It's not similar. It is that you're using it to plant back. She has nothing. She has nothing. So it's not a similarity. That's where that principle comes from, Elder Johnson. Right? That's where that principle. Remember, it's only with tithing of grain. It's never tithing of sheep. If you read it carefully, it's only tithing of grain. Right? But as I always say to people, when it comes to tithe, it is between you and God. Because Pastor Haynes can share your principles here, but at the end of the day, it's what you're convicted about. And if you're convicted that if you did not return, that you need to add the fifth part, and live happy. Do not add the fifth part and then you miserable. Because Pastor Haynes will not take responsibility for you being miserable. Amen? All right, listen, this is where the tithe goes. 10% goes to the division. 10% goes to the union. 20% goes to education. And 1% goes to the publishing. So that's 10, 20, 40, that's 41%, right? Which means that at the end of the day, 59% of the tithe is what the conference has to use to run the operations of the church, the conference, which is pay pastors, help pay teachers, pay workers, for evangelism, for retirement, for persons, for maintenance, all of those things, to buy all of those things, buy equipment, all of those things. So that's 59% is not a lot of person. So a lot of people say, but the conference will get a lot of money, but this is what happens to it. So only 59% is left. All right, let's go quickly. How do we rob God? In tithes and offering. Listen to what Sister White says. A faithful tithe is the Lord's portion. To withhold is to rob God. Every man shall freely and willingly and gladly bring tithes and offerings into the storehouse of God, because in so doing there's a blessing. There is no safety from God. There's no safety in withholding from God his own portion. So we rob God when we do not faithfully return, or we don't return tithe and offering. We rob God. You stick up God. So God, let me see about my tithe. To say the tithe of all increases in the Lord, he has reserved it for himself to be employed for religious purposes. A neglect of postponement of this duty would provoke the divine displeasure. Yes, ma'am.
Offering on half the tithe. If you pay $100 for tithe, you do not have to pay $50 for offering.
The question is asked, how much offering should you return? She's advocating 50 to 100, 55%. She's asking a question. Your offering is determined on what God requires. Your offering is determined by what God requires. You with me? So sometimes it may be more than half. Sometimes it may be equal. Sometimes it may be even more than equal. That what? Or more than equal? Yeah. More than equal. But no, people don't mind paying less than half. It's when you get more than half, people got a problem with it. Yes, Elder. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're into offering, but I'm going to answer that, right? I got 10 minutes, I got 15 minutes to answer it. This is what Sister White says. The evasion of the positive commands of God concerning tithe and offering is registered in the books of heaven as robbery towards him. So if you are not returning tithe, you are robbing God, and it is written in heaven against your name. R-O-B-B-E-R. Robber. And not only is it written against your name, robber, but the actual figure that you should be returning is also noted in heaven. She says what? We must repay what has been withheld from God, no matter, that's what I say. We must repair what has been withheld from God, no matter how long it has been withheld. It says all that withheld of that which God claims the tenth of the increase is recorded in the books of heaven against the withholders as robbery. Such defraud their Creator. And when the sin of neglect is brought before them, it is not enough for them to change their course and begin to work from that time upon right principle. This will not correct the figures made in the heavenly record for embezzling the property committed to them in trust to be returned to the lender. But that's a serious statement there. She says, when you hear, it's not enough to just start doing the right thing. She says you have to go now and correct the figures made in heaven. And the figures made in heaven will be how much you are supposed to be returning. That's what the figures in heaven, that's the figures next to your name. How much you should be returning. If you have robbed the Lord, make restitution. As far as possible, make the past right. Wow. This is Sister White. No, this ain't Pastor Hines. She says, if you have robbed the Lord, if you have withheld from the Lord, no matter how long you have withheld, make the past right. Get yourself back in order. So, Pastor, you mean to tell me that if I return tithe for the last 3 years, that I got to give back God all that money? What do you think the answer to that is? You sure? You positive that's the answer? Huh? Yeah, I should answer a hard question from time to time. Yes, it is your responsibility to return it. Now, this is how I sorry that I didn't put that quote. There was a brother who was in a similar situation, and he realized that he was not returning tithe faithfully. And when he added it up, it came to a large sum that he didn't have. And so he asked Sister White, and Sister White basically said to him, come into a covenant relationship with God, where you decide with God, this is how I am going to repay you what belongs to you. So you may say, okay, Lord, well, I know it is supposed to be this amount, so I'm going to return my tithe, and then I'm also going to return my back tithe, a portion of my back tithe. Yeah? So even if that person dies and that portion is not fully repaid because of that covenant relationship, and they're being faithful to that covenant relationship to return that back tithe, there will still be, that robbery would have been written out against, they blotted out of their names. All right, sir, and then ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that they come to preach it now. The question is that there's a teaching going around. Am I right to say a teaching going around? Only in the north. Is it there's a teaching going around? Come on, that people believe that no one should tell a person that they have to, how much they have to return as tithe. That should be between the person and them. I got it right? Well, let me just say this one. This is how I'm going to respond to this, right? No, he's talking about the tithe. Because there are some people who believe that they can return what is tithe. Whatever they feel like is tithe. Yeah, no one should tell them. I trust me. I have had meetings and people say that to me, and they go like, okay, but this is how I see it. This is how I see it. If withholding of tithe or not returning a faithful tithe is robbery of God, robbery from God, it means that the person who robs God, salvation is in jeopardy. As a shepherd, as shepherds and as leaders, it is our responsibility to ensure that our members are walking in a right relationship with God. That's our responsibility. I see that as my responsibility. And I will do what I can to encourage and to motivate members to make sure that they are walking according to how God wants them to walk. So I will have to, if I have to preach it, if I realize that it's a trend in church, I will not only visit the household, but I will preach it from the podium. Because members must understand what God requires of them. Amen? All right. Yes, yes. Woo. But you only choose one. Choose one now. Yeah, choose one. Because I only got 6 more minutes. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm. Amen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Amen. It's a good thing you only let you do one, boy. I love that, but that's a good testimony. It's a testimony about trusting God. Because when it comes to tithe and offering is all about trusting God, you know. That's what it's all about, trusting God. Whether you trust God enough. Now, God has trusted you enough to give you, to bless you. And he said to you, I trust you with this. And I trust that you will do what I require. And now it's up to you to trust God, to give him back what he requires and trust him to take care of you. And even if he don't take care of you, the way how you expect to be taken care of, you ain't dead. And even if you're dead, once you're fearful, you will get resurrected. But that's a hard one, boy. My sister? Are you finished? I'll answer a question from my sister. all right, little sister, go ahead. Uh-huh. A streaming question. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. The question is asked, should we return tithe on our income tax return or sickness benefits? Pardon? Yeah, you've paid on your gross. Okay, yeah, basically, remember your sickness benefit comes out of your Social Security contribution. But also remember that the employer's contribution is also part of that as well. Yeah, so you talk to God about that and you work it out, right? So that answer is good. The income tax return. I want to talk a little bit about the income tax return. The income tax return is basically the government saying to you, because you have contributed to a charity, we will not tax you on the money that you have contributed to the charity. And so we will give you that tax back. You with me? Everybody with me? So really that's not taxable because you have already returned tithe on your gross. Yeah, so when you get back that refund, income tax refund, you don't have to return tithe on that. Right? Because you have already returned tithe on it already. All right? You have already returned tithe on it already. Yes, ma'am. Wait, just a minute. I'm hearing a lot of mumbling. Is it because y'all want to go home that you're mumbling so? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, once you've received a gratuity, it means that you have contributed nothing to it. And so therefore it is a direct blessing from God, and so therefore you should return it. This is the principle I use. As long as I recognize it's a blessing from God, I return tithe on it. Now, there are some blessings that I may contribute a part to, such as pension or sickness benefit, right? Then you can deduct your portion and return tithe on the remainder. But the simple principle is, as long as you recognize that it's a blessing from God, you return. So the first question you ask yourself is this a blessing from God? And if your answer to that is yes, then there's only one more thing to do. Return your tithe. Yes, ma'am. Returning tithe. Mm-hmm. Oh. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that is your opinion, and you're entitled to that opinion. But there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it, because the government, once again, is God allowing you to find favor in the eyes of the government. Because the government, the thing is that if you covenant with the Salvation Army to return money to the Salvation Army as a charity, you will get it back, but it's only up to 10% of your income. Yeah, so even if let's say you're not a Seventh-day Adventist and you're in your community, and that person covenants with the Salvation Army, they can claim back for the same thing, because it is not the government is not saying it as tithe, no. The government is saying it as a contribution to a charity. Yeah. No, you don't get back all your tithe. You get back the tax. The tax that was calculated on the tithe. So let's say your tithe was $200 and you return $200, and the government said, okay, we would have taxed you 35% of that, or let's say 25%, so to make my math a little easier. 35%, right? Well, you know God calculated for me. I was saying 25% to make my math easier, but if you said 35%, you got calculated. No. Let me say. Let's say 25% of that is what? A quarter of 200 is about what? 50? Yeah, so the government says, okay, we charge you $50 tax on that $200 that you contributed to a charity. And because you're contributing to a charity, we're going to give you back that $50 tax. Yeah, so you're not getting back $200. You're not getting back your tithe, no. You're not getting back your tithe. You're just getting back the tax that they would have charged you on that portion of income, right? Yes, sir. A little child got a question? Yeah. To tithe or tax? Tax? We used to thank God, boy. No, boy. Children don't pay tax, but children should return tithe. Okay. Children should return tithe on allowance. Yeah? And now we're not talking about lunch. We're not talking about lunch allowance. We're not talking about if you give them money to buy lunch. That's not allowance. That's because you didn't feel it cooking and you give them money so they can buy lunch. So that's not an allowance. But if you say to them, okay, I'm going to give you $50 every month just because you're my child and I love you, it then becomes an allowance that they can do anything with, then they should return tithe on it. Right? Or if they say they're gonna wash the car or do something in the house and you say you're gonna pay them, they return tithe on that. Right? So you must teach your children to return tithe. All right, let's go quickly. All right, so you all understand that principle, right? All officers should set an example. So every officer of the church should be returning tithe and offering. Amen? All should be returning tithe and offering. All right, let's look at offering quickly. Offering is a covenant between you and God. All right, just ignore that. Just as tithe has a purpose, offerings also have a purpose. The purpose of the offering is yeah, I'm glad that you can tell time. The purpose of the offering is to carry out the work of the local church. The purpose of the offering is to carry out the work of the local church, also assist the conference in its development, and also for mission. That's the purpose of the offering. Everybody got that? So how do I know how much offering I'm supposed to give? How do I know that? Just putting my hand in my pocket and taking out John Redmond Bevel is not enough. It's because every year the church comes up with a budget. That budget, as we learned last night, is calculated or compiled based on what the department said that they want to do in the church, what the leadership says they want to do in terms of enhancing the church, whether it's buying pews, whether it's fixing the roof, whether it's buying equipment, and what the treasurer says is the normal operating expenses of the church. The department say to you, we want to be able to impact the community in this way, and this is how much it's going to cost. The leader say to you, we want to do these things in the church, and this is how much it's going to cost. The treasurer says, this is the operating cost of the church. So all three of those figures are added together, and that is the budget of the church. If that is the budget of the church, it means that is what the church is intending to do to advance the work of God. Everybody with me so far? You with me so far? So therefore, if we are to ensure that the work of God is taken care of it or advanced, it means that we must give enough offerings to get that amount. So let's say that amount is $80,000. I'm just pulling a figure out of the air. All right, let me pull a lower figure because y'all don't like that figure. If that amount is $75,000, if that amount is $75,000, it means that every member should contribute offering to come up to that $75,000. Am I right or am I wrong? So how much as a member do I pay? What the easiest way that I think this can be done is usually compare offering to tithe. So if your tithe is 100,000 and your offering is supposed to be 80,000, it means that every tithe returning member, for every dollar that they're returning tithe, they should return 80 cents in offering. You with me? So that when you reach your $100,000 in tithe, you know that you would have received your $80,000 in offering. Now, there may be members who are not working to return tithe, but they also still give an offering. So that would also help to bring up the amount. But that then will determine what your offering will be. So that is why it's important to go to business meetings so you can see what the church's budget is. And so you can say, well, I agree to that. So that you will say, well, this is what we want to do to advance the cause of God. And therefore, I not only pledge in my time and my abilities and my gifts and my body, but I'm also pledging my finance. And you go home, you know what you do? You go home, you sit down in your bed, and you talk to God. And you say, Lord, the church requires this amount of money from me in order to advance your work. It's going to be a little tight on me, but I'm going to trust you to provide for me. I'm going to trust you, and I'm covenanting with you that no matter what happens, I am going to return this amount every month. That's what we call systematic benevolence. You with me? Now watch this now. So let's say you have decided for your tithe is $200. Whoa, I'm making this thing real difficult. Your tithe is $100, so therefore your offering should be $80 using that principle. Yeah? Now the church decides that they want to buy an organ. And they say to you, this is the cost of the organ. You should not take the $80 that you have covenanted with God to help run the budget. You should not take that offering and put it into the organ fund. If you want to put something in the organ fund, you take something extra. If you want something to put in the building fund, you take something extra. If you want something to put in the benevolent fund, you take something extra. And I'm going to say this one as well. If you go overseas, or if you go up Old Berry, do not take your offering that is for K-Fill or for Chance Hall or for Northern Light and put it in at Old Berry, because that $80 belongs to your church. If you want to give something in at Old Berry, you take something extra. That way, the church will have enough funds to do what they need to do in the community to advance the church and to fulfill its vision. Amen? All right. All right. Go ahead. I'm hearing no. Yes, sir. Wait. Stop. This hand here first, and then your hand. All right? Yes, Elder. Mm-hmm. 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 Correct. You made a covenant with God or no? And Pastor is that made a covenant. Huh? You no understand. Mm-hmm. No, you shouldn't break a covenant. You shouldn't break a covenant, and that's why sometimes you okay, you know for the church situation, the offering is for the year. You know that's for the year. The next year, the church may come up with another budget that requires you to pay $1.10 for every dollar in tithe. But it is what God requires. And so we got to trust God. That's all about. It's all about trusting God. So when you make that covenant with God, that's between you and God. If you want to make that covenant, you got to go back to God and talk to God about that. Yeah? All right, one more step and then I'm gone. Yeah, sorry, Elder. Sorry. Yes, sir, sorry. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. $10. Mm-hmm. That's the understanding of the concept, double tithing. Really and truly, the double tithe comes out of a passage in Numbers chapter 14, where Numbers talks about a tithe, another tithe. It's not talking about the tithe of Leviticus. It's talking about another tithe that you take that tithe and you go to the church and you eat that tithe. You consume that tithe in the church, in the place of worship. And in the third year, you take that same tithe, you stay at home, and you invite all of the strangers and all of the poor persons in the community to come and partake of that tithe by your home. So basically, the double tithe concept is really a tithe and an offering. But is an offering that is equivalent to the tithe. That's where the whole double tithe concept comes from. Yeah? That's where the concept comes from. Mm-hmm. 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 I'm trying to see if you understand. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Carefully, yeah. Mm-hmm. Correct. 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 And it should be all of that should be part of your vision as to where you want the church to go. Correct. 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 And that's why you should have a business meeting every quarter so that you can see where the church is in terms of their contribution towards the budget. That's the whole purpose of the business meeting every quarter. So that the church can say it, so that the church can see where they're at and they can talk about it. All right. Last quote right here. There are only two places in the universe where you can place our treasures. In God's storehouse or in Satan's. And all that is not devoted to God's service is counted on Satan's side and goes to strengthen his cause. I want us to think about that really, 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 really seriously. Because everything that God has blessed us with, if we do not intentionally resolve in our mind that we're going to use it for God's service, we are putting it up for the probability that Satan can use it. And that is a very serious and sobering situation to be in. There was a lady that had a question at the back. Where? You have the question? Which question? Oh, okay. But when you talk about the covenant, yeah. No. What I'm saying is, I'm going to answer that now. Your offering, as I said just now, should be a covenant between you and God, which means that it should be systematic benevolence, which means that you give the same thing. You cannot take that offering and go and buy something that you think the church needs and feel that you have freed yourself of your responsibility to God. You have made a covenant with God, and that covenant is to give the offering towards the combined budget. If you want to go and buy something, that would be extra. And they got people that got the gall to sit down in church and realize that the church wants something, and they go and they buy it and come back to the treasurer and say to the treasurer, I buy this for the church. I want back my money. Are you serious? The church has no obligation to them at all. None. If you want to buy something for the church, it is out of extra, and you give it to the church as a gift. Don't go back confusing the treasurer, running down behind the treasurer, so when they get back my money, then go to the pastor. Pastor, I buy this thing for the church and they want to give me back my money. That in the church board didn't approve nothing. I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights, I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet. Great. Let's stand. Let's stand. This is the last time we'll be singing this song. Well, this is the last time I can be singing it with you. Brethren, in order for this week to really make any significance, we have to apply the principles here. You with me? Yeah, we got to apply the principles. Or not, it's just be another talk shop. And I don't like talk shops. I don't like to be used as a talk shop host. So please, please,
1, 2.
please apply the principles. Amen? Amen? All right. Let's sing the first stanza and the last stanza, and then we'll go home. Get some food. And then think about how we can help God to do his work. Where the sound leaders are? They go home? We can sing this. We can sing this song, Pastor. I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying onward bound. Lord, plant my feet.
Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
Sing the chorus now.
Lord, lift me up.
And then I shall stand. By faith.
By faith on heaven's table land.
A higher plane.
A higher plane.
Than I have found.
Than I have found.
Lord, plant my
Lord,
feet.
plant my feet on higher ground.
All right, without the instruments now, before these instruments, we're going to sing the next stanza without the instruments.
I want to scale.
I want to hear you singing.
The utmost high.
I catch a gleam.
And catch a gleam.
Of glory bright.
Of glory bright.
But still I'll pray.
But still I'll pray.
Till heaven I've found.
Till heaven I've found. Lord, lead me on to higher ground.
Join us, musician.
Lord, lift me up and I shall stand. By faith on heaven's table land. A higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on high.
Let's sing that chorus again. Let's sing that chorus again.
Lord, lift me up.
And I shall stand.
And I shall stand.
By faith.
By faith on heaven's table land.
A higher plane.
A higher plane.
Than I have found.
Than I have found.
Lord, plant my feet.
Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
We have come to the end of another week. Praise the Lord. Now the hard work begins. And it starts with you going home and sitting down and talking to God about your stewardship walk with him, your stewardship lifestyle, and how you can improve it. Have that conversation with him, please. And when you have that conversation with him and you commit to him, trust him. Do what?
Trust him.
Trust him. There were some great cards that we gave out last week. We were supposed to collect them back. So I want you, if you have them home, to fill them out and bring them back and give them to your pastor. Right? And we're going to continue the spiritual gift surveys, and we'll make sure that everyone understands their giftedness. Heads are bowed. Loving Father, we thank you for the time spent in your courts. We thank you for the word of instruction through the Bible and through the spirit of prophecy. We ask, Lord, that you will give us disciplined hearts and resolved minds and intentional decisions to do all that you have called us to do. We recognize that it won't be easy, but we know it will be worth it. And we will trust you, even though it may look dark, even though it may get discouraging. We will trust you to help us to be overcomers. We thank you for the victories that we will gain in our own lives and victories as a church. And we look forward to 3 years from now, when we would have achieved the visions that we have casted. And so that by your grace, many others will come to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. We thank you for this holy Sabbath day, the privilege to come into your house to worship you as burden of like beliefs. But we are about to leave your house, but we know that we are always in your presence. So we ask that you will take us home safely. You will give us a good meal, an enjoyable meal. And you will bring us back for the afternoon's activity, where we can go out and share a word with somebody, so that they can have this hope that we have, so that they can experience the love that we experience with you, and so that they too can join us and share the blessings that we have received from your hands. So into your hands we commit our lives. Use us, transform us, mold us, shape us as you see fit. And so that when Jesus shall come, that we all will be ready to meet him. And not only us, Lord, but our neighbors and our friends and our family members and our co-workers and the lady from over in the community next door and the gentleman from the road down, from the house down the road, and that little boy, that little girl that gives so much trouble. We want to pray for them, that they too will stand up victorious like us when we shall all sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. And we should take our crowns from our head and cast them at the feet of Jesus and say, all praise and glory and honor belongs to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen.